What if Tywin's wife didn't die in childbirth? Let's explore the one birth that quietly breaks Westeros. The halls of Casterly Rock are alive with activity as its lady's screams echo across the stone. She lies in her chambers, sweat-soaked and pale, tended by a dozen midwives and a muster dragged from his bed, all brought in from across the Seven Kingdoms for their skill. They work furiously to keep Lady Joanna breathing while they work the twisted, stubborn child out of her. Blood slicks the sheets, the air stinks of iron and fear, and beyond the door, a lion waits. Tywin Lannister stands in the corridor, rigid as the rock itself. In one world, he will walk through the door and find a dead wife, a living monster, and something inside him will calcify forever. In this world, however, Joanna Lannister continues to breathe. The maester's hands do not slip. The bleeding slows. The child cries, and so does the mother who survives him. With that single heartbeat, everything bends. The one person Tywin truly loved does not vanish into bloody linen and whispered condolences. The child he would have blamed for her death is suddenly innocent in his eyes. No curse, no cosmic insult written in dwarf's flesh. The coldest man in Westeros does not have permission to turn entirely to stone, because the one witness who knows the softer parts of him is still there to see, to judge, to quietly arch an eyebrow when he reaches for cruelty instead of calculation. From this chamber, our story moves fast. We will follow Joanna's steady hand through Aerys's growing madness, through the slow fracture between king and hand, through the moment when Jaime Lannister's white cloak is not yet fastened and can still be refused. Meanwhile, we will watch Cersei's path twist away from King's Landing, her marriage bed bargained to another realm entirely. Oh, because a living mother with court experience understands that tying her daughter to a volatile drunk on a stolen throne is not sound policy, merely an extravagant insult wrapped in gold. This will be a cinematic, in-world third-person tale, dropping us into feasts, councils, and battlefields, then pulling back to explain the political logic beneath each altered choice. It is clear that one spared life in a birthing bed can ripple into Robert's rebellion, reshaped, into Targaryen heirs fostered instead of butchered, and the War of the Five Kings turning into something far more coherent than 5 men flailing at crowns. At the center of it all stands Tyrion, not as Tywin's shame, but as his secret weapon. Trained deliberately in numbers, ravens, and the quiet art of listening, he becomes the son Joanna defends and Tywin reluctantly invests in. The question is not whether this child survives, but whether the old order of Westeros can survive him. Blood on stone. The night. Joanna should have died. Tyrion will survive. The question is whether Joanna Lannister will. The Rock sleeps poorly that night. Far below the gilded windows and roaring hearths, waves hurl themselves against stone. A dull, endless thunder that crawls up through the bones of Casterly Rock. Above, in the torchlit corridors, the sound changes. The muffled clank of armor as Lannister men-at-arms shift their weight. The soft hiss of whispered prayers. The rustle of servants who know better than to be seen running. Tallow candles burn low in iron sconces, their greasy smoke mixing with the sharper tang of Maester's herbs, seeping under a single heavy oaken door. Behind that door, the world has narrowed to blood and breath. The birthing room is overheated, crowded, and loud. Midwives move in frantic rhythm, skirts darkened, hands red to the wrist as they work furiously keeping Lady Joanna stable while they work the baby out. A copper basin overflows pink onto the rushes. The maester's hands tremble as he reaches for fresh cloth, then for the next vial of something that promises to slow the bleeding and never quite delivers. Joanna lies half-raised on the bed, pale beneath sweat-slick curls, gold hair plastered to her brow. Her nightgown has been cut open, linen clings wetly to her skin. Every breath is a labor, every contraction a wave that threatens to drown her. She bites down on a strip of leather rather than scream, because she is Joanna Lannister, and because there are servants present. It is clear that even now she refuses to give the Rock the spectacle of its lady broken. Then, at last, the child comes. Small, twisted, wrong in the way his limbs bend and his head lolls, yet undeniably alive. He arrives wailing, a raw, furious sound that cuts through the chamber. For a heartbeat, there is only that cry, no prophecy, no curse. Just a newborn, demanding heir. One of the midwives flinches when she sees him. This insult is not lost on Joanna, whose fingers claw weakly toward the child, before another spasm of pain drags her attention back inside her own body. Meanwhile, outside the oaken door, Tywin Lannister walks a narrow strip of stone into a trench. He is still the realm's most feared hand, the man who broke the Rains and the Tarbecks and taught half the kingdom to fear red and gold. However, tonight his armor is a doublet hastily thrown over a linen shirt, unlaced at the throat, his hair disordered in a way no council ever witnessed. He stands rigid, jaw locked, as servants pass with lowered eyes. He will not sit, he will not ask, but his hands continue to shake, betraying him in small, treasonous tremors. The door opens once, then again. Each time, the Maester's face grows grimmer. He speaks of tearing, of blood that will not slow, of a womb that has given too much. He does not quite say, "She will not see the dawn," but the words hang there anyway, heavy as the rock itself. Tywin hears, and something inside him begins to calcify around that sentence. Back in the chamber, the air thickens. Joanna's breathing turns shallow, then ragged. The midwive's orders falter into hoarse whispers. Even the baby's cries soften, as if the room itself is bracing. Candles gutter. For one suspended moment, all of Casterly Rock seems to listen at that door. Her chest rises once, twice, then stutters. The Maester leans in, fingers at her throat, eyes already preparing the practiced sorrow of bad news history expects him to deliver. With that, we reach the edge of what Westeros remembers, and the heartbeat where everything is supposed to end. The breath that shouldn't be. Joanna refuses to die. Her chest does not stay still. The breath that should have been her last rips back into her in a ragged, wet gasp, loud in the horrified quiet. Joanna's hand claws at the blood-soaked sheets, fingers curling as if she can seize the world itself and refuse to be dragged down into the dark. One of the midwives screams. Another drops the cloth she was folding for a corpse that no longer consents to be one. The Maester jerks back, his prepared sorrow shattering. Then training returns. He snaps orders, voice suddenly sharp as any Lannister steel. Hot wine, more linen, needle, and gut. They work furiously keeping Lady Joanna stable, while they work to stop the river of red pouring out of her. He presses poultices that sting of vinegar and strange herbs, muttering half-remembered charms he would never admit to in daylight. The bleeding slows. Not enough. Then, a little more. It is clear that this death sentence might yet be commuted. Meanwhile, at the door, protocol breaks. Tywin doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't wait for news. He hits the doors with his shoulder, thus shoving past a protesting maid whose fear of her lord finally outweighs her sense of decorum. The man who once stared down Aerys Targaryen without flinching stumbles on the threshold of his own bedchamber. He does not look at the squalling, twisted bundle in the midwife's arms. His eyes go straight to Joanna's face, to the pallor under the sweat, to the flutter of her lashes. For a heartbeat, he sees only a body, and the world narrows to a single, roaring absence. Then, her lips move. Mr. Tywin. It is barely more than breath, a scraped whisper, but it hits him harder than any warhammer. His knees almost give. A hand, someone's hand, he will never remember whose, catches his elbow. The insult of being witnessed in weakness is nothing. This insult is not lost on him, but it cannot compete with the miracle on the bed. She is alive. The Maester, hands slick, does not dare clear his throat too loudly. My lord, the bleeding slows. She may yet survive, thus if the stranger is merciful. His gaze flicks to the child, small and malformed. Limbs wrong, head too large, face pinched and red. Despite that, the boy's cry continues, thin but stubborn, cutting through the chamber. 2 survivals in one night. For a man trained to count coin, even the Maester knows those odds are absurd. He is already thinking, in some distant guilty corner of his mind, of how singers will ruin this with golden metaphors. Tywin does not think of songs. His world focuses to Joanna's hand in his, her fingers cold but gripping back. Relief hits him so hard it is almost nauseating. The armor he wears, the one no smith forged, cracks at the edges. His mouth trembles. He bows his head, just once, over their joined hands. Only then does he look at the child. The boy is wrong to the eye, and the room still smells of blood and fear. Yet the tiny chest rises and falls with fierce regularity. No prophecy, no curse, only confusion. Yet for one unguarded instant, there is no hatred there at all. What happens when a man who never forgives is handed back everything he feared to lose? Let's explore how that answer reshapes Casterly Rock in the years to come. A lioness awakens. Joanna's first look at Tyrion. The room is quiet when she wakes, not peaceful, never that, but quiet in the stunned, breathless way a battlefield is quiet once the screaming stops. Pain arrives first, a deep, dragging ache in her hips and belly. In the raw burn of torn flesh, the heavy pull of limbs that do not wish to move. Her throat is sand-dry when she swallows, and the effort sends a spike of pain through her ribs. Dawn creeps in thin, gray fingers through the high windows of Casterly Rock, turning the chamber's gold into dull brass and the blood on the sheets into rust. Joanna blinks up at the carved lion above her bed. It stares back, indifferent. She remembers the chaos, the Meister's muttered prayers, and at the women working furiously to keep her tethered to this world while they worked the child free of her. Then, nothing. A pit. A fall. The taste of iron. Her lips crack when she speaks. The child? The words are barely there, but everyone in the room hears them. They have been waiting for that question, dreading it. The nearest midwife, a thin woman with red-rimmed eyes, hesitates. She glances at the maester, then at the other women, as though hoping someone else will step forward and take the burden. No one moves. The bundle in her arms squirms, small and restless, and she flinches as if burned. This insult is not lost on Joanna. "Bring him," she says, not loud, but clear enough that disobedience would be an act of treason. The midwife comes, steps dragging. She holds the child at an awkward distance, already ashamed of him, already braced for the mother's horror. The world has decided what this boy is before his own mother has even seen his face. It is clear that this is how they will continue if unchecked. Joanna will not leave it unchecked. The bundle is lowered into her arms. He is smaller than her other babes were, head too large for the narrow shoulders, legs twisted under him. One eye is dark, Lannister green, the other a strange pale mismatch that catches the dim light and throws it back. The nose is wrong, the limbs wrong, yet the proportions wrong. He is also warm, breathing, fighting the swaddling with a quiet, furious insistence that reminds her, with painful clarity, of another Lannister she has shared a bed with for half her life. In another world, this is where the story ends. She dies, and he becomes the ghost that murdered her. A living reminder that even Tywin Lannister could not protect what he loved. Here, however, Joanna survives, and the equation changes. And the same child who once proved the gods could take everything now proves they failed to finish the job. "My little lion," she whispers and pulls him closer, so his strange face is pressed against her breast. The room shifts around that choice. No wailing, no rejection, no demand to take the monster away. Only acceptance, delivered as an order. "Lady Joanna," the maester begins, already searching for gentle phrases about deformity, about expectations, about preparing oneself. She cuts him off with a glance sharp enough to flay. "He is mine. He is Tywin's. He is Lannister. You will remember that." The midwife lowers her eyes. Shame flickers there, and fear. Good. Let them be afraid of failing him. Meanwhile, in the back of her mind, Joanna is already counting enemies, not on battlefields, but in corridors and dining halls, in whispered jests and careless stares. She has seen courts. She has watched men and women tear apart those who do not fit. Westeros will try to make this boy a monster long before he has the chance to become one. No one in this room says Tywin's name, but he hangs over them all the same. Joanna thinks of her husband's pride, of the way he wears honor and legacy as armor and weapon both. She knows exactly what this child will look to him, a flaw hammered into the golden sigil of his house. She rests her cheek against the downy, damp hair. You will not make a monster of him, she thinks. And in that moment, it is not a hope, but a vow. Not the septa, not the servants, not the rock itself, and not even Tywin Lannister. With that, the balance in Casterly Rock begins to tilt. The dwarf who once grew up as a walking insult now becomes something else, proof that Joanna Lannister did not yield to fate. And as she holds him, already planning which tutors will come, which cruelties will be cut off at the root, the future hand of the king is being remade, not by Tywin's hatred, but by Joanna's decision to keep her lion cub in from the wolves. Tywin without a funeral, a different kind of hardening. Tyrion breathes, Joanna survives, and something else in Casterly Rock refuses to die as well. The last, fragile piece of Tywin Lannister that is still capable of softness. In canon, that piece does not survive the year 273 AC. Joanna's death becomes the wound he never permits to scab. The black banners, the silent hall, and the maester counting out condolences instead of heartbeats. Tywin walks through that funeral and turns grief into policy. He hardens, then calcifies. Every glance at Tyrion becomes a reminder of failure. A wife gone, a son twisted, a legacy stained. He cannot strike at death, so he strikes at the child who caused it. It is clear that the cruelty we see later, the mockeries, the arranged marriages, the cold dismissals, grows from that single, poisoned root. Here, that funeral never happens. No black lions hang over the rock, no servants whisper about the lady laid out in gold. Instead, the halls buzz in a different key. Joanna lives, pale but breathing, her room thick with the smells of blood, wine, and boiled linen. The maester comes and goes. Kevin is not standing at Tywin's shoulder offering cold comfort. He is downstairs, managing panicked servants who expected a wake and must now adjust to a recovery. Tywin does not stand before a bier. He sits in a hard-backed chair by Joanna's bed, armor off, jaw clenched, watching her chest rise and fall as if daring it to stop. Meanwhile, the baby waits. When Tywin finally goes to him, it is not in a sept full of candles, but in a cramped nursery that still smells of milk and wet wool. He looks down and sees the truth at once. The head too large, the limbs wrong, the features off just enough to be an insult to Lannister symmetry. This insult is not lost on him. In the original script, this is where the accusation would land. You killed her. However, Joanna is alive, only a few rooms away, stubbornly refusing to die on command. So he studies the child instead. Clinical, detached. A problem to be measured, not a curse pronounced. The dwarf mules and kicks, small and furious. And Tywin notes the strength in those tiny lungs with a strategist's eye. A weak monster would be easier to ignore. Joanna refuses to let him ignore anything. Propped up on pillows, still drawn with pain, she insists on holding Tyrion, insists on Tywin standing close enough to see. She calls the baby their son, not their misfortune, and when he frets over the deformities, she cuts through his silence with a dry, dark edge. Of course the boy survives. Any child of Tywin Lannister would be too stubborn to die easily. The line lands halfway between jest and judgment, and Tywin hears both. With that, the dwarf is quietly refiled in Tywin's mind. Not an omen, but an inconvenience. An imperfect son. Politically awkward, yet undeniably a Lannister of Casterly Rock. Discarding him would offend Joanna, and worse, offend Tywin's own worship of blood and legacy. He will manage this problem, shape it, contain it. But what happens when the problem grows into the sharpest mind in the rock, and Joanna refuses to let Tywin waste it? 3 children, 1 lioness, early childhood, rewritten. The problem grows, and Joanna refuses to let it be caged. Casterly Rock does not echo with silence and grudges in these years. The halls of Casterly Rock are alive with activity, as its lord's children scream and laugh across polished stone. Jaime and Cersei are golden-haired whirlwinds racing through sunlit corridors, their footsteps drumming past crimson banners and roaring lion sigils, while Tyrion wobbles along behind them on unsteady legs, one hand on the wall, the other gripping a carved wooden cane Joanna had commissioned from a master carver in Lannisport. At the center of this chaos stands Joanna, calm, composed, amused. A small court in miniature gathers wherever she settles. Maids, tutors, guards, and 3 Lannister cubs orbiting her as if she is a quiet son. When Jaime charges in with a wooden sword, breathless and flushed, declaring he will be the greatest knight in the realm, she smiles and adjusts his stance, correcting his grip, and are praising his courage. Then she asks, very mildly, if he plans to win his battles with charm alone, or if he might one day consider the reading a map. Jaime laughs, half offended, half adoring. This insult is not lost on him, even at 8. He remembers it later, when steel and strategy begin to matter equally. Cersei, meanwhile, sprawls at Joanna's feet with a book far too advanced for her age, tracing the lines of a family tree. She recites names of kings and queens, and weighing their choices with a precocious sharpness that would worry a duller mother. Joanna praises her recall, her grasp of cause and consequence. However, when Cersei's eyes narrow at Tyrion struggling over a simple passage, Joanna's gaze sharpens first. "His legs are crooked, mother, and his letters are worse," Cersei says, voice dripping with contempt. "If he were a horse, we'd drown him." The room stills. Joanna does not raise her voice. She does not need to. One look, cold as Lannisport steel, freezes her daughter mid-smirk. "Lions do not turn on their own cubs in front of the pack," she says quietly. "Not if they wish the pack to fear them." Cersei lowers her eyes, chastened but thinking. It is clear that Joanna has not crushed the girl's pride. She has redirected it. The lesson lands: cruelty is a tool, not a reflex, and it must never undermine the family's image. Tyrion, despite everything, survives these early years in a house that, in canon, I half ignored and half hated him. Here, he has one unyielding defender. Joanna insists he sit in on Maester Craylin's lessons, that he read histories aloud until his tongue stops tripping, that he watch the stewards tally grain and gold. He continues to ask questions that make grown men uncomfortable. Let's explore why this matters. The boy who once drowned himself in wine now drowns himself in ledgers, maps, and overheard arguments. The seeds of his later political genius are planted not in solitude, but in enforced observation. When Tywin meets with bannermen, Joanna ensures Tyrion is there, small and silent in the corner. This insult is not lost on those proud Westerland lords, forced to present petitions under the gaze of a dwarf child. Yet they also see Joanna's hand on his shoulder, and understand he is not to be dismissed. Tywin watches all this from a distance more often than he joins it. He stands in a shadowed balcony or at the far end of a hall, arms crossed, expression unreadable, as Joanna laughs with all 3 children over some minor absurdity. A spilled ink pot, a broken practice sword, Tyrion's dry remark cutting sharper than Jaime's blade. He says little. However, something in him softens, almost against his will. Rejecting Tyrion outright would now mean rejecting the scene before him. Joanna's hand in the boy's hair, Hai's easy grin, Cersei's reluctant smirk. To cast out the imperfect son would be to wound the woman he loves and fracture the image of the perfect Lannister family he is growing obsessed with. With that tension coiled beneath the surface, the stage is set. What happens when this carefully curated pride collides with a mad king, a brewing rebellion, and a son Tywin can neither disown nor entirely control? The Mad King's shadow, re-establishing the political board. With that tension coiled, the camera pulls back from the nursery at Casterly Rock and returns us to King's Landing, where the real storm is brewing. The year is drifting into the late 270s AC. The child who should have been Tywin's private shame has survived, and the king who should have trusted his hand is growing afraid of his own shadow. Aerys II continues to unravel. His hair grows longer, his nails dirtier, his temper shorter. He sees plots in every corridor, and fire as the answer to most of them. Meanwhile, the realm itself still runs with unnerving efficiency. Harvests are tallied, roads are repaired, coin continues to flow. That is Tywin's work. He is the steel spine holding up a rotting body, issuing crisp decrees while the man on the throne mutters to himself about treason and wildfire. It is clear that this contrast eats at Aerys. Once the king and his hand had moved in tandem, 2 young men reshaping the realm after the chaos of Jaehaerys II. Now, if the courtiers bow lower to Tywin than to their monarch, they seek the hand's favor, his judgments, his protection. The more Aerys decays, the more Tywin's competence becomes an insult merely by existing. Joanna understands this dynamic all too well. She once walked these halls as Rhaella's lady-in-waiting, watching the queen suffer miscarriage after miscarriage, listening to muffled sobs behind closed doors, while Aerys raged or sulked or simply ignored her. She remembers the way his jests cut, how he would turn his wife's pain into entertainment for bored lords. Those memories survive in sharp detail, and they color every raven that arrives from the capital. So, when Tyrion is born twisted and small, the news that reaches court is not only of a difficult birth and a living mother. It is of a malformed Lannister heir. Aerys, already jealous of Tywin's reputation, finally has something he can twist. In private gatherings, half drunk on Arbor Gold, he wonders aloud if the gods have better taste than Tywin, if even lions can whelp monsters. The laughs are nervous, but they come. This insult is not lost on anyone. They are certainly not lost on Joanna. Old friends in the Queen's household send careful reports. A phrase here, a cruel nickname there, the way Aerys's eyes brighten when someone mentions the dwarf. She reads between the lines and understands. Her son is no longer just a family complication. He is a pressure point the Mad King will press whenever he wishes to wound the hand. Tywin hears enough to stiffen his jaw and grind his teeth, though his replies remain formal, measured, cold. Joanna hears enough to start making choices. Does she press Tywin to maintain their grip on royal policy, to endure the king's jabs for the sake of influence? Or does she pull her family back, retreating to the rock before Aerys's paranoia turns lethal? Let's explore how that looming fracture reshapes both rebellion and loyalty in the years to come. Mocking the lion's cub, Aerys's cruel jests. The quarrels continue, and Aerys's pettiness keeps finding new targets. The next small council meeting proves it. The chamber is hot, close, reeking of ink and stale wine. Scrolls about grain levies and river traffic lie open before the king. Tywin focuses on the numbers, on the slow, dull work of keeping a realm from starving. Aerys, however, drums ink-stained fingers on the table, eyes bright with that growing, restless madness. Grain, he mutters. Always grain. His gaze slides to Tywin. Tell me, my lord Hand, do the gods bless your stores as generously as your wife's womb? Or did they send you a monster to humble your pride? The room tightens. Varys lowers his eyes. Pycelle coughs into his beard. A few lesser lords, eager and stupid, let out thin, nervous laughs that die quickly. And the word hangs there, monster, heavy as a hammer. Tywin's face is stone. He does not flinch, does not move, does not breathe more quickly. Inside, though, the insult lands clean. This insult is not lost on him. He remembers Joanna's pale face in the candlelight, remembers the Maester whispering that mother and child might not survive. He remembers holding Tyrion's tiny hand, hearing the boy's first ragged cry. Now that fragile victory is paraded as divine punishment. It is clear that the gods favor your grace with ample harvests, Tywin replies, voice level. The levies from the Reach, Aerys cuts him off with a bark of laughter. Yes, your numbers. Perhaps your dwarf will count them for you, when he is old enough to climb onto a chair. The courtiers laugh louder this time, relieved to have permission. One or two glance at the hand, to see if the lion will bare his teeth. He does not. He only nods once and returns to his parchment. Meanwhile, Shahi is already adding another line to an invisible ledger, another debt, another slight, another reason to leave this city of whispers and ash. Later, at a private feast, the insults turn fouler. The king is drunk, wine dribbling into his beard, crown askew. Musicians play too loudly. The air smells of roast boar and fear. A toast, Aerys slurs, raising his cup toward Joanna's empty seat. To Lady Joanna, who survives where lesser women perish. Tell me, Tywin, did she bet a demon beneath Casterly Rock, or one of the mine dwarfs crawled up to taste lioness? The table freezes. It is not just Tyrion now. It is Joanna's body, Joanna's honor, turned into a lewd court joke. Dry amusement flickers in a few eyes. Others stare at their plates, pretending deafness. Tywin's knuckles whiten around his goblet. To answer sharply is treason. To remain silent is humiliation. He forces the wine down, forces his voice to remain calm. Oh, Her Grace the Queen could tell you, if you recall her lady's chambers so well, he murmurs, the barest edge under the words. The barb lands. Aerys's smile thins. But the king is still the king. Tywin has to swallow the rest of what he wants to say. With that, Another line is carved into that private account book in his mind. Joanna hears of it not from Tywin, who spares her the details, but from an old friend at court. The letter is careful. Allusions wrapped in pleasantries, mention of a jest about demons, of laughter when the king spoke of her courage in childbirth, of how often Tyrion's name now appears in the king's cups. She reads between the lines at Casterly Rock, the sea pounding against the cliffs below. She understands at once. Aerys is using her son as a weapon against her husband. Her survival, Tyrion's survival, have become tools in the king's game. Despite the distance, and she feels the blow as sharply as if she had been in that hall. And as she folds the letter, fingers steady, Joanna Lannister begins to plan how to answer a mad king who has decided to make her child his jest. The next move will not be his alone. Joanna the strategist, choosing between court and rock. The next move will not be his alone. The solar at Casterly Rock is quiet, but not peaceful. Candles gutter over a table buried in parchment. King's Landing is laid out in ink and wax, royal decrees, court whispers, a dozen hands reporting a dozen new humiliations. Each fresh rumor of Aerys's mockery is a red mark in Joanna's mind. Another stroke of a quill across Lannister patience. Tywin stands rigid by the window. Joanna sits. That already tells the story. She has the letters spread before her as if they were a battlefield map, arranging them by source, by date, by growing venom. The one describing Tyrion as the king's little monster lies at the center. This insult is not lost on her. It is no longer madness at a distance, she says, voice level. He reaches for our children now. Tywin's instinct is to endure. He has survived Aerys's whims for years by sheer force of discipline. He focuses on the realm, on order, on the illusion that if the hand continues to hold, the king cannot entirely break. However, Joanna cuts through that comforting lie with a surgeon's precision. Aerys will never forgive you for being competent, she continues. He will never forgive me for leaving his court with my dignity intact. And he will never forgive Tyrion for surviving the night that should have killed us both. That is what he jests at. She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. It is clear that she has counted the cost of staying. Each jape at Tyrion is a test. Each slight to Cersei. In each attempt to keep Jaime and White and away from inheritance, another move in a game that ends with their line diminished, if not destroyed. Tywin's answer is the old one. Endure for power. Remain hand, remain near the throne, keep a grip on the levers of the realm. Meanwhile, Joanna proposes something that to him sounds dangerously close to retreat. Call it what you will, she says. I call it choosing the field. In King's Landing, we dance to his madness. In the West, that he must contend with our strength. Here the pattern breaks. In canon, Tywin's resignation is a wounded man's reaction to an insult over Jaime. In this room, with that letter about Tyrion between them, it becomes a planned maneuver. Joanna reframes the choice with almost cruel clarity. We pull back to the rock, she lays out. We consolidate. We raise Jaime as Lord of Casterly Rock, Cersei as a queen in all but name, Tyrion as the mind that keeps them from folly. We wait. Aerys continues to burn his own support. His line weakens itself without us there to steady it. She reminds him of what they learned in Rhaella's service. Targaryen fire consumes itself when left unattended. Why stand so close to the blaze? Let's explore what happens if the lions step back and watch the dragons devour one another. Tywin resists, then relents. The logic is too sharp, the threat to their children too immediate. His pride would stay, and his wife will not allow it to drag their heirs down with him. With that, his decision crystallizes. He will resign as hand, not as a man spurned, but as a commander changing fronts at his general's urging. Joanna Lannister has chosen Casterly Rock over King's Landing, and for once, Tywin follows. The lion steps back. Tywin's resignation. Reimagined. Tywin does not flee, he withdraws. The distinction matters to him, and Joanna makes sure the realm sees it that way. When he enters the throne room to resign, his armor is not gilded, his cloak not crimson. He wears the sober black and gold of a steward, not a conqueror. and the courtiers whisper as the hand of the king walks as if to judgment. He bows, perfectly, no hesitation, no tremor. "Your Grace," he says, voice even. "The burdens of the Westerlands grow heavier. My bannermen press me for my presence. I beg leave to resign the hand's chain, that I may attend to my own duties, and knight as you so wisely counseled." The word wisely is a small blade. Aerys hears only the flattery. The court hears the echo of the king's own taunts thrown back at him, polished to courtesy. This insult is not lost on the older lords, but no one moves, no one ever does. On the dais, Aerys smirks, thin and sharp. He toys with the arm of the Iron Throne, nails scraping rust. "At last," he says, loud enough for the hall, "the lion remembers he is only Warden of the West. Very well, Lord Tywin. Hey, go home. We shall see whether the Westerlands survive your absence from our side." Laughter ripples, nervous and eager. It is clear that Aerys believes he has humbled his rival, driven the proud Lannister away in disgrace. Meanwhile, Tywin's face remains carved stone. He accepts the dismissal with a final, flawless bow. The words are Joanna's. Days earlier, in their chambers, she had sat with him while a scribe copied draft after draft. As she trims away every phrase that smells of wounded pride, every sentence that might give Aerys a pretext to lash out. She replaces them with duty, deference, the illusion of surrender. "Let him think he has won," she tells Tywin. "We leave on our feet, not in chains." In canon, this is where the long, bitter silence would begin, a feud fed by humiliation and paranoia. Here, the break is colder, narrower. Bridges are not burned, they are carefully iced over. Joanna keeps correspondence open with Rhaella, sends measured gifts, continues the polite fiction that the Lannisters remain loyal servants, merely distant ones. The realm sees a cooling, not an open rupture, for now. In private, however, the king cannot help himself. One night, drunk on his own triumph, Aerys leans close to Varys and a few chosen sycophants. "Did you see his little monster?" he hisses. "A crippled cub for a crippled legacy. Perhaps the gods knew better than to let Lannister blood sit this throne." The words slither back to Tywin, as such things always do. This insult is not lost on him. If there had been any lingering dream of Cersei as a queen to a Targaryen prince, of Jaime as more than a glorified bodyguard, it dies there. He will never again offer his children as royal playthings to a madman who mocks the child Joanna nearly died to protect. With that, the Lannister withdrawal becomes doctrine, not gesture. The day they leave, the Red Keep watches them go with 100 shuttered eyes. Joanna rides in the wheelhouse, Cersei and Jaime press to her sides, their golden heads bent together as she speaks softly of Casterly Rock, of home, of duties that do not depend on a king's favor. Tyrion, small and restless, pulls back a curtain and peers out. King's Landing stinks of smoke and sea and too many people. He will grow up hearing endless stories of these streets, of this court, and of the mad king who once held his father's leash. Yet the city itself will remain distant to him, a rumor more than a memory. Behind them, the Red Keep recedes on the hill, a jagged silhouette against the pale sky. To Joanna, it is a chapter closed. To Tywin, a battlefield abandoned, not forgotten. And to the story of Westeros, it is a fuse left smoldering rather than cut. What happens when the lion retreats to his own den, with his wife and all 3 cubs intact? Let's explore how that changes the next war. A fortress becomes a school. Tywin refocuses on the west. Tywin does not slink home. He advances on Casterly Rock as a commander returning to his true battlefield, banners snapping in the sea wind, columns of men and wagons trailing behind him. The Rock looms ahead, not as a retirement, but as a campaign. Within weeks, the rhythm of the Westerlands changes. Audits begin, quiet, efficient, merciless. Ravens fly to Crakehall, Marbrand. Rain cadet branches that survived, every vassal reminded that the lion may have left King's Landing, but he has not grown tame. Ledgers are dragged out, grain counts checked, troop musters verified. Those who have grown fat and lazy under distant royal drama discover that Tywin's memory for past slights continues to be excellent. Banditry along the Gold Road and in the hills around Lannisport is crushed with military precision. Small folk whisper that it is safer to move coin under Lannister banners than to pray in a sept. Tywin focuses on roads, on patrols, on the flow of gold and trade through Lannisport's harbor. The Rock becomes the beating heart of a disciplined, wealthy war machine rather than a mere ancestral seat. Jaime grows up in this pressure chamber. Instead of being raised on romantic tales of white cloaks and distant courts, he wakes to the clang of steel in Casterly Rock's yard. The master-at-arms drills him until his arms shake, until the golden boy's easy smile turns to a tight, concentrated line. Occasionally, Tywin himself steps into the ring. No speeches, no praise, just corrections, hard parries, and the quiet, devastating again. It is clear that Jaime's image of glory is being rewritten, blow by blow. Honor is no longer a song about the Kingsguard. It is standing your ground while your father drives you backward across the yard in front of watching men. And meanwhile, Cersei looks east, not west. The Red Keep is a memory, but to her, it remains the center of the world. That her father now spends his days with ledgers and captains rather than kings is an insult, and this insult is not lost on her. She wants the capital, the silks, the whispers in the royal corridors. Joanna sees this growing frustration and refuses to let it rot into pure resentment. If Cersei cannot sit beside a queen, she will learn to rule the West. Joanna walks her through guest lists for feasts, through the petty feuds of Lannister bannermen, through which houses must be courted and which can be threatened. Names like Crakehall, Brax, and Swift become pieces on a board Cersei is expected to understand, not just adorn. Tyrion, too small for swordplay and too clever to be left in the nursery, survives in a different arena. At Joanna's insistence, he is permitted to sit quietly in the corner during some of Tywin's councils. He says nothing, his legs dangling from a too-tall chair, but his ears are open. He hears how a delayed debt becomes leverage, how an oath is twisted, how a threat is phrased so politely it almost sounds generous. Despite himself, Tywin notices the questions that come afterward. Why did you forgive Lord So-and-so's arrears? Why threaten his son instead of his wife? The boy is annoying. The boy is insightful. Both things can be true. With that, the Lannister household hardens rather than softens. And Joanna tempers Tywin's ruthlessness, but she does not blunt it. She redirects it outward, away from his own blood and toward any house foolish enough to test the West. The Rock becomes a school for lions, not a cage. And when rebellion finally comes, it will find a Westerlands that has been quietly preparing for war for years. The heir in steel, Jaime's grooming. Under two parents. The Rock is ready for war, but before the banners ever rise, Tywin and Joanna wage a quieter campaign, in the training yard, in the solar, in their son's head. Jaime is 15 when it becomes clear that Casterly Rock is watching its future move on two quick feet. The yard rings with steel and shouted commands. Dust rises, sweat stings his eyes, and still he moves easily, predator smooth, driving a seasoned armsman back step by step. Tywin stands at the edge of the yard, still as a statue carved from pale stone. While Joanna sits beneath a red and gold awning, embroidery forgotten in her lap. Tywin sees form, balance, killing strokes. He watches Jaime disarm the man with a twist of the wrist and a brutal shove, and for once the hand of the West allows himself a thin, genuine smile. This, he thinks, is what a Lannister heir should be, not merely competent, dominant. Joanna, however, sees the flash of satisfaction in Jaime's eyes as the man hits the ground. She notes how quickly the boy's grin appears. Yes, how quickly it fades when he glances at his father for approval. It is clear that his confidence is real, but so is his hunger to please. After the bout, Tywin walks the yard with him. Short declarative lessons. Expanded heavy meaning. A lord does not tire. A lord does not boast. A lord remembers that every sword he commands is an extension of his will. He speaks of duty, of Casterly Rock, as something Jaime will not merely inherit but carry, a mountain on his shoulders. Jaime listens, and jaw clenched, trying to stand taller under that invisible weight. Meanwhile, Joanna waits until evening, when the steel is sheathed and the boy is only a boy again. She finds him in the solar, polishing his sword, still replaying the day's victory. She does not praise his skill. She asks him why he fights. For glory? For his name? For the men beside him? The questions unsettle him more than any feint. When he mutters something about honor, she only arches a brow and tells him softly, nay, that honor without strategy is just a prettier way to die. This insult is not lost on him, nor is the way she then speaks of the men behind the armor, their families, their fears, the cost if their lord's courage outruns his judgment. She is teaching him that a lord's battlefield is wider than any yard. Yet, for all their careful shaping, there are shadows they do not see until they nearly stumble over them. One afternoon, Joanna pushes open Cersei's chamber door without knocking. She finds the twins too close on a window seat, hands brushing, conversation dropping into guilty silence. Nothing overt, nothing she can name. But the way they look at each other is not the way most siblings ever will. She says nothing in the moment, only dismisses Jaime with an errand, and holds Cersei's gaze a heartbeat too long. With that, a new unease settles in her. That night, alone, Joanna recalibrates. Jaime is brave, dutiful, quick to learn, but his heart moves faster than his mind. Satan, his sister, has her hands on the reins. For a house that intends him to stand as its sole pillar, that dependency is a crack in the stone. The question is, when pressure comes, from court, from king, from rebellion, which way will that crack run? The daughter who won't listen, Cersei versus her mother. The crack runs straight through his daughter. In the years that follow, it is clear that Cersei Lannister does not intend to be anyone's supporting pillar. She is a growing storm in silk, and Joanna feels the pressure long before Tywin does. While her brother rides the yard and Tyrion survives his ledgers and lessons, Cersei sits in the solar with her mother, quill in hand, jaw clenched tight enough to cut glass. Joanna has shifted tactics. She does not try to blunt her daughter's edge. She tries to aim it. She sets Cersei to reading accounts from Lannisport, tracing how coin flows from mines to merchants to the Rock. She has her copy letters to bannermen, and then rewrite them with the venom removed and the dignity intact. She walks her through which vassal houses must be courted, which can be commanded, and which must be flattered until they forget they were ever insulted. This insult is not lost on Cersei, that her mother's vision of power involves so many smiles. Cersei hears the scratching of her own quill, and, in her mind, drowns it out with the roar of the Iron Throne's blades. She listens to talk of Reynards and Crakehalls, but her thoughts continue to drift east, to King's Landing, to stories of Rhaella in her lonely chambers and Rhaegar in his shining armor. Joanna speaks of patience, of compromise, of marriages that bind houses rather than hearts. Cersei hears chains. One afternoon, the lesson breaks. Joanna is explaining again that a match to a great lord of the Reach or the Stormlands would secure Casterly Rock's future far better than chasing a crown in a mad king's court. Cersei's quill snaps in her hand. "Yes, secure," she says, voice low, dangerous. "You were Rhaella's lady. You were in the Red Keep. If you had wanted it, you could have been queen. You could have had father's hand and the realm at your feet. But you were content to pour wine for a woman who trembled at her own husband. The words hang there. For a heartbeat, Casterly Rock feels very quiet. Joanna sets down her own quill. When she looks at her daughter, there is no slap, no raised voice, only memory. "Laram, I have seen what it means to be queen to that king," she answers. "I watched Rhaella survive her wedding bed, her childbed, her husband's suspicions. I watched a realm held together by fear and ash. I will not throw you into that fire so you can wear a prettier crown." Meanwhile, the wind rattles the shutters as if to underline the point. Cersei flushes, partly from shame, mostly from fury. To her, this is cowardice dressed up as wisdom. Joanna focuses on survival. Cersei wants conquest. Now let's explore the gap. One woman counting costs, another counting thrones. "Then you lack ambition," Cersei spits. "I will not." With that, she shoves back her chair and storms from the solar, skirts snapping behind her. She does not go to the yard or the sept. She goes to the highest balcony, stares east, and fixes Rhaegar Targaryen in her mind as if sheer will can bridge the distance. From that day, every gentle caution from Joanna becomes another stone in the wall Cersei intends to climb, and every warning about Aerys hardens into proof that her mother is afraid. And somewhere, beneath the anger, a quieter truth continues to grow. If Joanna will not open the gates to the Iron Throne, Cersei will simply find another way in. The next time King's Landing comes calling, that resolve is waiting. The third child, watching. Tyrion learns in the shadows. The next time King's Landing comes calling, that resolve is waiting. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Casterly Rock, another resolve is forming, quieter, sharper, and far less interested in crowns than in conversations. Tyrion cannot ride as Jaime rides. His legs are too short, his balance unreliable, his body an insult to every song ever sung about Golden Lannister sons. This insult is not lost on him, even as a child. However, Joanna refuses to let that be the end of the story. If he cannot dazzle a hall with a sword, she will arm him with something far more dangerous. She brings in the best maesters she can find, men whose reputations run from Old Town to King's Landing, and she gives them one clear command: do not condescend to my son. The Rock's library, already impressive, grows under her hand. Histories, ledgers, treatises on siegecraft, even dusty accounts of Essosi trade routes. Tyrion has them all, and more importantly, he has permission to ask why. He roams the galleries on unsteady legs, or a small shape moving between high columns and higher expectations. He cannot keep pace with Jaime in the yard, but he can sit very still behind a half-open door. Let's explore what that does to a boy. He hears Tywin and Joanna arguing over Aerys, over taxes, over which bannerman is drinking too deep from which cup. He hears the tone shifts, the pauses, the careful choosing of words, and he starts to practice. At first, it is in play. A maid scolds him, then he answers with one sharp sentence that makes the other servants snort into their sleeves. A visiting knight boasts. Tyrion asks one pointed question that leaves the man blinking. Joanna watches, and instead of slapping the jest out of his mouth, she sits him down. A joke, she explains, can be a shield or a dagger. It can disarm a threat, or it can give a threat a reason to remember your face. Timing, she insists, is the difference between surviving a room and being torn apart by it. With that, Iha's humor becomes disciplined, still dark, still cutting, but aimed. She lets him watch her soften a hard demand with a gentle phrase, then later shows him how that same gentleness, used at the wrong moment, would have been fatal. It is clear that she is training him, even if Tywin pretends not to see it. Tywin, however, does see the results. One evening, a minor bannerman complains about grain levies. Tyrion, half hidden behind Joanna's chair, murmurs that the man fears not the levy. Oh, but the precedent. Tywin tests the theory and finds it correct. Another day, a supply problem in the Westerlands mines. Tyrion proposes staggering the caravans to avoid bandits tracking a pattern. It works. Tywin does not praise him. He does, though, start asking, "Where is the boy?" before certain councils. In private, Joanna gives Tyrion the lesson that will define him. The world will always see your body first, she tells him, fingers on his cheek. So you must make certain your mind is the second thing they can never forget. And one day, Westeros will learn what it means when a Lannister heir is raised to win arguments instead of battles. Aerys strikes back. The Kingsguard Gambit. Tyrion is growing sharper by the day, and in King's Landing, Aerys is growing madder. With that, the balance between lion and dragon tilts again. Aerys, shut away in the Red Keep, surrounded by pyromancers and flatterers, Aegis continues to stew over every imagined slight Tywin ever dealt him. The resignation, the gold, Joanna's quiet dignity when she left court, each memory rankles. He cannot reach Tywin in the West, not with armies, not yet. But he can reach what Tywin values. Jaime, the boy whose birth Tywin once toasted as the future of House Lannister, the golden heir groomed for Casterly Rock. Aerys remembers the child at court, all bright hair and easy laughter. And in that memory, he finds a new weapon. The Kingsguard, a white cloak, a celibate life, and a bloodline cut at the root. This insult is not lost on the small council, though none dare name it in front of the king. To name Jaime Lannister to the Kingsguard is to strip Tywin of his firstborn son, to deny him grandchildren through his favorite heir, to turn the pride of the Rock into another ornament at court. It is clear that Aerys does not simply want service. He wants to wound. He wants Tywin to watch his legacy sworn away with 7 simple vows. Meanwhile, far from the Red Keep, the sea crashes against the cliffs of Casterly Rock when the royal summons arrives. Red wax, 3-headed dragon, the familiar suffocating weight of royal command. Joanna breaks the seal in her solar, intending to read it before bringing it to Tywin, a habit she developed in Rhaella's service and never quite lost. Her eyes move once over the words, then again, slower. Her face goes still, the color draining as if someone opened a vein. Aerys has remembered her children, and he has remembered how to use them. Tywin finds her standing at the window, the letter crushed in one hand. He reads it in silence. There is no shouting, no shattered goblet. Only the tightening of his jaw, the slight flare of his nostrils. The way his fingers rest on the lion worked in gold at his belt. Cold fury, banked and deadly. Once, he would have ridden for King's Landing. Now, he has someone who understands that the battlefield is parchment as much as steel. Joanna's mind moves quickly. She thinks of precedents, of ages of appointment, of whether consent has ever been refused and survived. She remembers Aerys before the madness, remembers Rhaella's quiet terror, remembers how the court whispered when Tywin's twins were born, and the king's eyes lingered too long on Joanna's face. She focuses on delay, on arguing Jaime is too young, that Tywin needs an heir in place while Tyrion is still a boy, on using her old friendships in the capital, such as they are, to press the point that offending the West, now, is dangerous. However, this insult is not lost on Aerys either. To deny him is to challenge the last authority he believes he still holds. And so, the question hangs over Casterly Rock as the ravens fly back and forth. With Joanna's court-honed instincts and a growing sense of the king's instability, can the Lannisters actually say no? Or will they be forced to hand over their golden son anyway? Can you say no to a mad king? Joanna tests the limits. The answer, as Joanna knows from bitter experience at court, is no. You do not say no to a mad king. You only convince him that what you wanted was his idea all along. She sits in her solar with the raven's parchment before her, the royal seal broken, the words already burned into her mind. Jaime, white cloak, King's Landing. The quill in her hand hovers, then moves. The reply is formal, gracious, and edged sharper than any Lannister blade. She invokes Orys Baratheon and Corlys Velaryon, past hands who kept their heirs close in dangerous reigns. She cites the Reach and the Riverlands, pointing out that great houses must remain strong if they are to survive winter, rebellion, and pointedly royal misfortune. On the surface, it is praise. Between the lines, it is a warning. Tywin reads the draft once, jaw tight. He sees only refusal. Joanna sees the performance. You are not denying him, she reminds her husband. You are begging leave to better serve him. Say that the Westerlands stand as his shield, but only if our heir remains to command them. He hates it. He hates needing to flatter the man who has humiliated him. However, she continues, Aerys must hear devotion, not defiance. You focus on his safety, his reign, his glory. Then make it clear that to waste Jaime on ceremony is beneath such a king. Dryly she adds, he will agree that no one deserves to be wasted more than you. This insult is not lost on Tywin, but it pulls the corner of his mouth anyway. When the reply returns, it does not come on paper. It comes in flesh. Varys arrives at Casterly Rock, soft-footed and soft-spoken, the royal seal hanging from his neck. Meanwhile, the household watches with growing unease as the spider is welcomed into the lion's den. Over wine, in the great hall, he delivers the king's answer with a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. The king is honored by Lord Tywin's concern. The king understands the need for strong houses. The king, in his wisdom, has decided that there is no greater proof of Lannister loyalty than gifting their golden son to guard him forever. Jaime's appointment, Varys purrs. Nay is a distinction no loyal subject would refuse. It is clear that this is not a conversation. It is a sentence. Later, when the courtiers are gone and the doors are shut, Joanna lets the mask slip. There is a line, she tells Tywin quietly. Beyond it, resistance becomes rebellion, and Aerys is unstable enough to burn the Westerlands rather than admit he was gainsaid. Pattern interrupt. For a moment, Tywin Lannister considers surrendering everything rather than surrendering his son. With that, we lose all, Joanna says, reading him. Jaime dies on some pyre, and Tyrion becomes heir to ashes. We cannot save Jaime from the cloak. We can only choose how he wears it. So, she bargains again. Not for refusal, but for time. Through Varys, through old friendships with Rhaella's ladies, through every thread she still holds in King's Landing, she extracts one concession: a delay. Jaime will go, but not tomorrow. Not this moon. In that narrow space she has carved. Joanna moves quickly. She prepares Jaime for the capital, steels him against Aerys, and, at the same time, begins the cold arithmetic of succession. Tyrion's education intensifies, Cersei's marriage prospects shift, and the Rock subtly reorients around a future where its true heir will never come home. They have not said no to the Mad King. They have only learned how to survive his yes. Jaime's oath, Joanna's terms. A different farewell. The decision is made in the throne room of madness, but the farewell happens in the quiet of Casterly Rock. The Godswood is a small, stunted thing this far west, more ornament than holy place. Yet tonight it is where a boy goes to die and a white knight is born. Jaime stands in gleaming armor beneath a pale weirwood that remembers none of his ancestors. His new white cloak hangs a little too stiff on his shoulders. It still smells of chalk and fresh wool, not yet of blood and smoke. Joanna steps close, fingers finding the clasp at his throat. Her hands remember him as a boy, tugging on her skirts with jam on his fingers and a wooden sword at his hip. Now she smooths the cloak the way she once smoothed his hair. Behind them, Tywin stands a few paces back, rigid with contained anger, every inch the warden who has just seen his heir stolen for another man's vanity. This insult is not lost on anyone present. "It is done," Tywin says, short, declarative, no room for argument. Then, after a beat, "Aid the expanded truth. The king has his Kingsguard. The Rock has adjustments to make." Joanna does not look back at him. Her focus stays on Jaime. "Listen to me," she says quietly. "I cannot stop you from taking this cloak. I will not try. You wanted this since you were small enough to trip over your own sword." There is a faint dry edge there. She remembers every bruised knee. "However, you are still a Lannister first, a Kingsguard second. Do you understand?" Jaime swallows. The words of the White Book, the songs of Sir Arthur Dayne and the others, are still ringing in his head. Glorious charges, shining honor, blades raised in perfect obedience. But his mother's voice cuts through the music. "I serve the king," he manages. "I swore—" "You swore to protect the king," Joanna corrects. "And the realm. The realm, Jaime. Aerys is not the realm." With that, the air shifts. She has known Aerys since before the silver in his hair. And since Joanna Lannister was only a clever lady-in-waiting, to Rhaella Targaryen watching a prince curdle into a paranoid tyrant. "He is cruel when he is afraid," she says, each word precise. "He is afraid often. He burns men for whispers. He sees traitors in shadows and plots in every courtesy. One day, he may demand something that spits on your vows rather than honors them." She lets that hang. Even the leaves seem to still. "Protect the innocent," she continues, "even from the man you guard, or especially from him, if it comes to that. Remember that your father and I did not raise you to be a sword without a mind." Meanwhile, Tywin's jaw works, but he says nothing. He hears the treason in her warning and the necessity in it. It is clear that this is not the wide-eyed boy Aerys thinks he has stolen. Joanna is making sure of that. Jaime looks between them. The romantic ideal of the Kingsguard, the White Tower, the White Cloaks, and the White Pages waiting for his deeds, wrestles with the darker picture she paints. The king not as shining sun, but as wildfire in human skin. Despite himself, he starts to imagine orders that should never be obeyed. "Will you be proud of me?" he asks, and for a moment he is 10 again. Joanna's smile is small and sad. "I am already proud. Be worthy of that, wherever you stand." He mounts and rides out through the courtyard, cloak snapping in the sea wind, the rock falling away behind him. Or the songs in his head continue, but now there is a discordant note. His mother's warning, his father's silence. He is more wary, less naive, as the road bends toward King's Landing and the Red Keep that will cage him. Joanna watches him go until the last glint of armor vanishes. Then she turns, her mind already racing ahead. If Jaime is lost to the succession, Casterly Rock must be redrawn around Cersei and Tyrion, whether Tywin likes it or not. Marriage contracts, regencies, the dangerous pride of a daughter and the growing brilliance of a despised son, these become her battlefield. The king has taken her son's sword. He will not have her house. And as the sea crashes against the rock below, Joanna begins to plan for a future in which the Golden Lion survives without its golden heir. The matchmaker of Casterly Rock, Joanna's marriage chessboard. The king has taken her son's sword. He will not have her house. With that resolve cooling into strategy, our Joanna turns from the training yard to the marriage board. Jaime is caged in white. Tyrion is growing into the mind she always suspected he had. That leaves Cersei, brilliant, venomous, and far too fixated on a crown that is not yet hers. It is clear that Joanna's core objective becomes brutally simple. If Jaime cannot inherit Casterly Rock, then Cersei must marry in a way that strengthens Lannister power while pulling her out of Jaime's orbit. Not only away from his bed, though she knows that truth in her bones, but away from his influence. The twins feed each other's worst impulses. Joanna intends to break that loop the way Westeros has always broken dangerous bonds, by wedding them elsewhere. So, she begins to survey the realm, not as Tywin would, with ledgers and threats, but as a woman who once walked the red halls of King's Landing beside Queen Rhaella. Dorne first. Oberyn Martell is unwed, dangerous, and famously difficult. However, Dorne offers spears, its ships, and a principled hatred of Aerys that could be useful in the storm she feels coming. A Lannister-Martell match would bind the south to the west, and Oberyn's sharpness might even keep Cersei in check, or die trying. Meanwhile, the Reach gleams on her mental map. Mace Tyrell's brood is young, but the promise of Highgarden's grain and bannermen is immense. A Cersei Tyrell match could wrap the lions in roses, securing food and fleets. The Riverlands are another option. A Tully's son or nephew, trading Casterly Rock's gold for the Riverlord's central position. Joanna weighs each possibility the way a Maester weighs remedies: military strength, political reach, temperament. Who can keep Cersei safe? Who can keep her contained? We see this play out not at a grand council, but in ink and whispers. Letters dispatched under Joanna's seal to Sunspear. It framed as condolences for Elyah's past humiliations and careful praise for Prince Doran's patience. Envoys sent to Highgarden, bearing rich gifts and richer compliments for Olenna Redwine's management of her fool of a son. Joanna uses her reputation from court, that memory of a poised lady beside Rhaella, to open doors that Tywin's blunt force never could. She does not demand, she inquires. This insult is not lost on Cersei. When her mother speaks of Dorne's honor or the Reach's bounty, Cersei hears only distance from King's Landing. She remains fixated on Rhaegar Targaryen, on the half-remembered prince who smiled at her once in the Red Keep. In her mind, she is already queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Southern or Reach lords are a demotion, not a prize. She dismisses them as beneath her imagined destiny, snapping that she was promised more. Joanna understands with a cold clarity that hurts more than any childbirth. She is not merely arranging a marriage contract. She is attempting to outmaneuver her own daughter's fantasies and the taboo bond between Cersei and Jaime. The game is no longer just houses and banners, it is the battlefield of her children's hearts. And as the ravens fly and replies begin to trickle back, Joanna wonders which will prove harder to bend, Dorne, the Reach, or her golden willful girl. What happens when the best match on parchment is the one your daughter will burn rather than accept? Then let's explore how the realm answers that question. Cersei versus Dorne, the proposal. She refuses. The best reply does not come from the Reach or the Riverlands. It comes from Sunspear. Joanna sits in her solar with the parchment open, the Dornish sunburst pressed in red wax at the bottom. Oberyn Nymeros Martell. Not heir, no, but brother to the Prince of Dorne, a viper with a scholar's mind and a sellsword's reputation. To many in the West, that would be an insult. To Joanna, it is clear that this is an opportunity. Dorne has survived dragons, Targaryen whims, and Robert's temper. It bows, but only on its own terms. A Lannister daughter wedded into that furnace of pride becomes a bridge to the one realm too stubborn to be ruled by fear alone. Oberyn is dangerous, yes, but he is also precisely the kind of man a Targaryen king cannot easily bully or discard, a buffer, walking and breathing between her blood and whatever madness might next sit the Iron Throne. When she brings it to Cersei, she does not start with banners and borders. She starts with Cersei herself. In Dorne, Joanna says, a princess walks unveiled in the sun. She takes lovers before and after marriage without being stoned in the streets. A Dornish husband expects a partner in council, not a silent broodmare in the nursery. Her voice stays calm, though her eyes are measuring. You would be far from King's Landing, far from Robert. It's far from every tongue that cuts when it speaks your name. She paints it quickly but vividly. Cersei on the terraces of Sunspear, ruling beside Oberyn while he rides to war or wanders to Old Town. A household where bastards are acknowledged, where daughters inherit, where a clever, beautiful lioness is not merely tolerated, but encouraged to bare her teeth. Meanwhile, the Rock gains an ally whose hatred for needless cruelty matches Joanna's own memories of Aerys, as Cersei hears her out. Then she laughs. South, she says, as if spitting out a bad grape. To bake under their sun, drink their sour wine, and watch some snake parade his paramours through my halls? The word Dornish lands on her tongue as an accusation. You would sell me south to hide me, to keep me out of the court, out of the Red Keep. This insult is not lost on Joanna. Her jaw tightens. I would send you where the king cannot use you up and throw you aside, she answers. Oh, where his bastards will not be dangled before you, where his temper cannot kill you in some drunken rage. I am trying to keep you alive, Cersei, alive and unbroken. Cersei's eyes glitter. Alive is not enough. I will not trade the Red Keep for some sandpit and a half-heir prince. I am meant for Rhaegar, for the Iron Throne, not for a man who beds anything that moves and calls it custom. They stand there, the air between them hot as any Dornish noon. Joanna sees the stubborn set of her daughter's chin, the growing fanaticism whenever Rhaegar's name is spoken. She could press. Tywin would. But she also knows what happens when a Lannister is caged and pushed only one way. With that, she folds the parchment. Very well, Joanna says quietly. We will not send word to Sunspear, not yet. She leaves the Solar with the offer unaccepted, but not destroyed, locked away with other dangerous, useful things. Time continues to move. As suitors continue to age, and somewhere in Sunspear, a viper goes unwedded. The clock is ticking, and Joanna knows it. The question is whether she can find a safer path for Cersei, before Cersei burns every path but the one that leads straight to the Red Keep. The secret she can't ignore. Joanna sees the twins. Clearly. The clock is ticking, and Joanna knows it. Meaning the question is whether she can find a safer path for Cersei, before Cersei burns every path but the one that leads straight to the Red Keep. The answer comes one evening in the Western Gallery. The Rock is quiet, the sea wind threading through arrow slits, carrying the distant boom of waves. Joanna turns a corner, expecting emptiness, and instead finds her twins. Jaime's hand is in Cersei's hair. Cersei's fingers are curled in his collar. It is not a childish embrace. It is stillness, hunger. The kind of silence that exists only when two people have forgotten the rest of the world. They spring apart too quickly. That, more than anything, confirms it. Children caught at mischief protest. These two simply stare, faces hardening into Lannister masks they are far too young to wear. Joanna says nothing. Not then. She walks past them as though she has seen nothing worse than a spilled cup of wine. However, her mind is already moving, weighing, cutting. She has heard the whispers from servants, dismissed them as gossip because she needed to. Now the whispers have a face, and that face has her cheekbones. In her Solar, she sends for Cersei alone. No raised voice, no slaps. Joanna Lannister has seen Aerys Targaryen humiliate his wife in public. She will not imitate him in private. Cersei arrives defiant, chin lifted, already prepared to deny everything. Joanna does not ask a question. She states a fact. You will not be alone with your brother again. The words land heavier than any shout. Cersei's eyes flash, her mouth opens, but Joanna continues, voice as cold and precise as a maester's scalpel. She lays it out. What happens if this reaches King's Landing? If some ambitious courtier feeds it to Aerys? If a Septon decides to make an example? Incest is treason. Children born of it can be named abominations, stripped of claim, used as tools for royal amusement. This insult is not lost on the gods, Joanna says, deliberately echoing the Septons. and it would not be lost on a king who delights in dragging noble houses through the mud. Cersei tries to sneer that they are Lannisters, that no one would dare. Joanna cuts through that too. Tywin's pride, their house's reputation, the way a single scandal can turn gold to lead in the eyes of Westeros. It is clear that if this secret reaches the Iron Throne, even the Lannisters do not merely suffer embarrassment, they bleed. With that, Joanna's long game shifts. Getting Cersei married is no longer about alliances or crowns. It is about distance. Physical, undeniable distance between daughter and son. Meanwhile, Jaime's future as heir becomes a question mark. Can she truly leave Casterly Rock to a man whose heart is chained to a woman he can never openly claim? Her thoughts circle back again and again to the third child. The one who did not charm rooms or win tourneys, but who watches, listens, remembers. Tyrion survives every insult thrown at him, and there are many. He continues to grow sharper, more dangerous in ways the realm underestimates. That night, Joanna stands alone over a spread map of the Westerlands and beyond. Her fingers rest on Casterly Rock, then drift east toward King's Landing and south toward Dorne. And she thinks the unthinkable, that the malformed boy the world mocks might have to become the stable center of House Lannister's future. And if that is true, then every move she makes from now on must protect him, even from his own brother and sister. The unexpected heir. Joanna quietly backs. Tyrion, her fingers leave the map, but the map does not leave her thoughts. The future of Casterly Rock has shifted in her mind, and Joanna does not intend to wait for fate, or Tywin to catch up. The next move comes in a smaller room, with lower stakes on the surface and far higher ones underneath. Tyrion sits at a heavy oak table buried in parchment, ink staining his fingers. He expects another lesson on histories and lineages. Instead, Joanna slides a fresh sheet toward him, already marked with her neat, controlled hand. A vassal in the crag refuses his levies, she says. His fields have failed, his men are hungry, and he claims he cannot spare a single sword. I go write my reply. Tyrion blinks, then he grins. Of course he does. This is not recitation. This is power in embryo. He dips his quill and begins. He threatens, then softens, then threatens again. He invokes duty, but forgets harvest cycles. Joanna lets him finish before she speaks. You'll starve him into obedience, she observes, and then be surprised when he dies, and his heir hates you. Her tone is mild. The criticism is not. This insult is not lost on Tyrion, who flushes. Then forces himself to meet her eyes. Try again, she continues. This time, assume you need his loyalty in 10 years, not 10 days. They work through rebellions, tariffs, disputes over river rights and mining charters. While they work, she keeps nudging him away from clever phrases toward consequences. Who bleeds, who pays, who remembers. It is clear that she is no longer content with him winning debates in his own head. She wants him ready to govern. Only when his hand is cramping does she lean back. Tyrion, she says quietly, the rock is heavy. It does not always rest on the shoulders everyone expects. He hears the words. He hears what she doesn't quite say. Jaime in white, sworn away. Cersei in silk, dreaming of crowns that are not Lannister gold. Him, the twisted third child, whom the realm would rather pretend did not survive the birthing bed. Mother, he answers, dry as the Dornish marches. The realm would sooner set a goat on the throne of Casterly Rock than me. Goats cannot write edicts, she replies, and they do not listen. Her hand covers his ink-stained fingers. You can do both. That is rarer than you think. Pride flares in him, sharp and intoxicating. Fear follows, colder. Tywin's face rises in his mind, the hard mouth, the measuring gaze, the unspoken verdict that has shadowed every step. Recognition from Joanna is a feast. Recognition from his father, in this role, it feels almost dangerous. What happens if the wrong person notices what she is doing? Joanna has already calculated that risk. Jaime's oaths to Aerys have chained him to the capital. Cersei's growing obsession with her twin and the Iron Throne makes her a liability waiting to be exploited by any king clever enough to see it. Tyrion, however, remains here. He drinks too much, talks too much, gambles too much, but he loves his house, and he is no one's royal hostage. With that, she begins to test how far she can move him into the daylight. A steward finds that minor disputes over tenant rents now pass through Tyrion's hands before reaching the castellan. A visiting merchant is surprised when the dwarf son, not the golden daughter, negotiates the price of Lannisport grain. The maester is instructed to consult Tyrion on ravens that once would have gone straight to Tywin. Meanwhile, and servants whisper that Lady Joanna spends more hours behind closed doors with her youngest than with either twin. It is clearly a small shift at first, easy to dismiss. But for those who watch the currents of power in Casterly Rock, something in the balance of attention has begun, quietly to tilt. And the question is how long it will be before Tywin notices. Let's explore what happens when he finally does. Tywin's blind spot. A father confronts a new succession. Tywin notices in pieces. At first, it is only that Tyrion is in the room more often. The boy survives on the edges of council tables, perched on cushions so he can see over polished oak, ink-stained fingers tapping in time with the Maester's droning reports. He does not speak much. However, when he does, minor stewards begin adjusting ledgers, revising grain tallies, rerouting a wagon train here or a shipment of ore there. Nothing grand, nothing that threatens anyone important. Yet. Meanwhile, Tywin tracks the pattern the way a general tracks banners on a distant field. Tyrion is present when minor contracts are reviewed, when disputes between lesser vassals are weighed, when the master of coin for the rock hesitates and, almost reflexively now, glances toward Joanna's youngest son before finishing his sentence. This insult is not lost on Tywin, though no one is foolish enough to name it aloud. He sees Joanna's hand in it. Of course he does. The confrontation comes one evening in her solar, where the heir still remembers her days at the Targaryen court. Silk cushions, a faint trace of Myrish perfume, letters from half the great houses stacked in neat, lethal piles. Tywin closes the door with the same finality he once used on rebel lords. "You indulge him," he says, short declarative, no preamble. "You feed these ideas that he might inherit what is mine." Joanna does not look up immediately. She continues sealing a letter, the wax cooling under her signet. When she finally meets his gaze, her voice is calm in the way sharpened steel is calm. "I feed nothing that is not already growing," she answers. Tyrion asks the right questions. Our bannermen notice. Tywin's jaw tightens. Our bannermen will never bend the knee to a dwarf as Lord of Casterly Rock. No lord in Westeros will. They will smile at your games while I live and tear this house apart when I die. With that, the old wound is laid bare. Legacy, a respect, the terror of Lannister grandeur mocked in whispers. It is clear that his pride is doing most of the talking. Joanna, however, has never been impressed by Lannister pride. "Jaime cannot inherit," she says, each word precise. "He wears white, and you insisted on that cloak. Cersei is brilliant and vicious and will burn any man she cannot control. You know this. Pretending otherwise will not save our name." She lets the silence stretch. That leaves Tyrion, in chaos. Tywin feels the trap because he helped build it. His mind runs through contingencies the way it once ran through rebel supply lines. Jaime is bound to the Kingsguard. Cersei is, volatile is the polite word, dangerous is the honest one. Tyrion is a dwarf, a living affront to everything Tywin tells himself a Lannister should be. Despite that, the boy's figures are always right. His instincts on men's weaknesses uncomfortably close to Tywin's own. In a ruthless pragmatism claws at his pride. "He is not my heir," Tywin says at last. "Not yet." Joanna hears the word that matters. Yet. She inclines her head, accepting a victory that has not been named. She does not ask for proclamations. She does not demand titles. She only continues to have Tyrion present, continues to ask his opinion where others can see, continues to let the idea of him, as something more than a family embarrassment, seep into the stone of Casterly Rock. Tywin does not forbid it. He does not endorse it either. An uneasy, unspoken truce settles over the question of succession, as fragile as glass and twice as sharp. For now, Tyrion's future hangs in the balance. Half heir, half hostage to his father's pride. And when the next crisis hits the realm, that balance will be tested in ways none of them are prepared for. Robert's rebellion, Ignites, Joanna reads the flames. The balance is tested sooner than anyone in Casterly Rock expects. But news does not arrive as a single thunderclap. It comes in ragged echoes. A whispered report that Rhaegar Targaryen has abducted Lyanna Stark. A sharper one that Brandon Stark rode to King's Landing in a fury and demanded the prince's head. Then, days later, the cold line in a raven from the capital. Brandon and Rickard Stark executed. Eddard and Robert named traitors. Joanna reads that line twice. Tywin only needs it once. In canon, so this is where events slide downhill on greased stone. Jon Arryn's banners rise, Robert flees the Crownlands, the Stormlands and the North ignite, and the realm splits into rebel and royalist camps almost overnight. Here, however, there is one more mind weighing the flames before the Westerlands move. The Maester of Casterly Rock lays out 3 scrolls on the table, one from Riverrun, tense and careful, one from King's Landing, drowning in titles and Aerys's paranoia, and one from an old hand at court, a lady who once shared a chamber with Joanna in the Red Keep, who still dares to write in half-truths rather than lies. Ravens speak of battles in the Stormlands, of Robert's hammer breaking royal hosts, of the prince missing from the field. Rumors say Rhaegar ran off with Lyanna in a fit of Targaryen madness. Others hint at prophecy and consent, at a prince who meant to replace his father rather than simply shame him. None of it is clear. All of it is dangerous. Tywin's jaw hardens as he listens. His instinct is the same one history remembers. Wait. Let the stag and dragon bleed each other white, then ride out under the lion when the victor is obvious and the price can be named. Joanna does not disagree with the waiting. She disagrees with the purpose. Your father backed a king, she reminds him quietly, and when that king fell, he fell with him. We will not repeat that. Her focus is not on Robert, or Rhaegar, or even Aerys. It is on the chair they fight over, and the ledgers that will need balancing when the fighting stops. She argues for cautious neutrality, not Lannister indifference. Gold moves quietly to both sides through intermediaries. Grain is sold at a profit to the Crownlands and, through a different set of factors, to the Riverlands. Meanwhile, Casterly Rock's swords remain sheathed, its gates open only to information. Pattern interrupt. Joanna writes to Rhaella, no open defiance, no treason on parchment, just a careful letter to a frightened queen, reminding her of an old lady in waiting who once bandaged her hand and listened to her tears. Through that channel, Joanna hears of Aerys's growing terror, of wildfire mutterings, of a court that continues to rot from the top down. It is clear that this will not end with a simple change of crowns. Over a late council, as maps lie scattered and candle wax pools on Lannisport, Joanna finally says what Tywin has not yet dared to voice. When this is done, she tells him, the Targaryen name may survive, but their dynasty will not. The realm will not trust them again. There will be a king, but there will also be a void. Tywin hears opportunity. Joanna hears a trap. The lion must be ready to step into that void, she continues, but not as a usurper, as the hand that steadies the throne, whichever head wears the crown. With that, Lannister neutrality becomes something sharper, poised intervention, delayed on purpose. They will not simply back the winning man, they will prepare to own the peace. And when Rhaegar finally rides to the Trident, Joanna is already planning for a world where no dragon truly rules again. The sack reconsidered. Does Joanna temper Tywin's fury? Tywin rides for King's Landing, with his banners blazing and his options narrowing. The rebellion is all but won. Rhaegar's dead on the Trident. Aerys is cornered in his own madness, and the Lannisters must choose a side. In canon, we know what comes next. Let's explore what happens when Joanna Lannister is still there to argue about the price. In the real timeline, Tywin appears at the gates as the loyal hand returned. Armor polished, lions gleaming. He is let in, the gates open, and then the knives come out. His men flood the streets, the city burns. Elia Martell is butchered, her children smashed and stabbed. Their corpses wrapped in crimson cloaks and presented to Robert Baratheon as a bloody wedding gift to his new crown. It is clear that, for Tywin, the message matters more than the method. Lannisters back the winner, and they do not do half measures. Here, however, there is a closed door at the Rock before there is an open gate at King's Landing. Joanna stands at the table, studying the raven letters, the shifting allegiances, the growing certainty that Robert will win. Tywin's plan is blunt. Take the city, kill the heirs, arrive with proof in hand, and leave Robert with no rival dragons to rally behind. Clean, in his mind. Efficient. Efficient, Joanna repeats, the word dry as Dornish sand. You mean memorable. You mean infamous. She does not deny the need to prove loyalty. She understands it too well after years at Aerys's court. However, she asks the question Tywin refuses to voice. Do they truly need dead children to prove it? She warns him calmly, that this will not just stain the streets, it will stain the lion. Aaliyah's screams will echo in every Dornish hall. The murder of babes will give every future enemy a moral cudgel to swing at House Lannister, even when they cannot match its swords. You will win Robert's gratitude for a season, she says, and his disgust for a lifetime, and our grandchildren will survive to bear that insult. This insult is not lost on Tywin. Meanwhile, she offers another path. Take the city fast, yes. To crush the gold cloaks that resist, seize the Red Keep, but capture the Targaryen children. Put Aegon and Rhaenys in Lannister custody, not on Lannister spears. Hostages are worth more than corpses. A living dragon in Casterly Rock's nursery is leverage for decades. Tywin resists. Dead rivals cannot scheme. Dead children cannot become banners for some future rebellion. Yet Joanna continues, focusing on the long game. Aegon can be raised loyal, married where they choose. It used to bind Dorne or the Reach. Rhaenys can be fostered out, perhaps to Winterfell, where Eddard Stark's honor can be shackled to Lannister mercy. In the end, the sack still comes. The gates open, the lions pour in, and King's Landing screams. But the brutality is trimmed at the edges. Fewer homes are put to the torch. Fewer noble children vanish in alleys. The royal heirs are dragged from beneath beds and behind tapestries, not to die, but to be claimed. Whether Tywin has truly listened, or merely compromised, remains unresolved. The city remembers a sack. Westeros remembers a betrayal. But the legacy of that day, its hostages, its grudges, its future wars, now bends around a quieter presence. The lioness who kept whispering even as the gates fell, and those children in Lannister hands will reshape every bargain that follows. Orth, a different queen. Cersei. Baratheon marriage under Joanna's eye. Those children in Lannister hands mean one more thing. Robert Baratheon does not get to simply demand a Lannister bride. He has to negotiate with Joanna Lannister. The proposal still comes. A Lannister-Baratheon match is too useful to ignore. It binds the new king to the richest house in Westeros, gives the Lannisters a swift return to court, and, not incidentally, Topper puts a lioness in Robert's marriage bed before any other house can move. Tywin sees the gold and the glory. Joanna sees the chains and the leverage. Let's explore how differently those chains are forged. She does not go to King's Landing herself at first. Her presence would be an admission that the Rock is supplicant. Instead, she sends envoys drilled to within an inch of their lives, armed with her questions, her conditions, her refusals. They speak of dowry and ceremony while she, from Casterly Rock, continues to dictate the real terms. A Lannister on the small council, formal protections for Cersei's household, written guarantees over her dower lands, and, quietly, a place for Tyrion in the new regime, perhaps as master of coin and training, perhaps as the careful steward of royal debts that will inevitably grow. This insult is not lost on Robert when he realizes that the dwarf he once mocked in tavern tales is now being positioned to count his coins. However, and he needs Lannister gold, and Joanna has made it clear that the gold comes with strings. Tywin pushes for glory, for banners and titles. Joanna focuses on survivable power, offices that cannot be easily stripped, hostages who are also pupils, influence that outlasts Robert's temper. Cersei, meanwhile, gets her crown, on parchment at least. She watches her mother's envoys return, watches Tywin's rare concessions. And understands that this marriage has been arranged with the same care one uses to stack wildfire. There is triumph in her, she will be queen, but also a growing resentment. In canon, she could pretend she was the architect of her fate, the secret equal of Tywin. Here, Joanna survives to puncture that illusion with a raised eyebrow and a correctly quoted clause from the marriage contract. Before Cersei leaves, Joanna calls her to the solar. No grand speech, no soft lies. She has known Robert since court, has watched him drink, rage, and grieve. She tells her daughter, plainly, that Robert's temper is real, his appetite's worse, and his capacity for faithful love nearly non-existent. He will never love her as he loved Lyanna. He may never truly see her at all. Treat the marriage as a throne to manage, Joanna says, not a romance to win. It is clear that Cersei listens. She does not become kinder, she becomes colder, less naive, more bitter, and she rides for King's Landing knowing two things: that her mother will judge every choice she makes as queen, and that for once, the lioness will be watching from the rock, not from a grave. With that, the game in the capital begins under very different eyes. A Tyrion in King's Landing. A very different imp arrives. The game in the capital begins under very different eyes. Those eyes are not only Cersei's. A few months after the royal wedding, another pair of mismatched green and black eyes arrives at the city gates. Tyrion Lannister comes to King's Landing not as a half-banished embarrassment, but as something far more dangerous. A Lannister who has been told he belongs. He rides behind a modest escort, his saddle adjusted to his twisted legs, his doublet rich but not ostentatious. In his saddlebags, wrapped in red and gold ribbon, are letters bearing Joanna's neat, precise hand and Tywin's uncompromising seal. They name him no official title. They do something subtler. They present him as our son, Tyrion, whose counsel we have found of use at Casterly Rock. This insult is not lost on the old courtiers who remember Tywin refusing to let anyone speak ill of Joanna. If he now admits the dwarf's counsel is useful, what does that say about the dwarf? Word runs ahead of him through the Red Keep. The imp is coming, they say, the clever one Joanna herself educated. The jokes still come, about his height, or his face, the way his legs do not quite agree on a direction. However, the laughter has an edge. Servants whisper that Lady Joanna reads his letters and answers them in her own hand. A few remember her as Rhaella's lady-in-waiting and wonder what she has told this son about the ghosts of the Targaryen court. Tyrion enters the throne room already knowing half the faces. Joanna has drilled him. Old Targaryen loyalists who bent the knee with gritted teeth. New men raised by Robert's favor. Varys, who watched Aerys unravel. Pycelle, who survived every reign by bending his spine. Robert himself, who continues to treat the crown as a very heavy drinking horn. With that preparation, Tyrion's jests land more precisely. His feigned ignorance hides sharper observation. He flatters Robert's hunting stories, then quietly asks about grain levies. He trades dry barbs with Renly, then watches which bannermen laugh and which only smile. Yeah, he notes how Cersei's gaze flicks between her husband and the courtiers, measuring, counting, already growing colder. It is clear that he moves through these halls with more confidence than the canon Tyrion who first arrives as Hand. Here, he is an unofficial advisor on probation, not a desperate exile on holiday. This alters his vices. He still drinks. Westeros has not changed that much. He still visits brothels, though less as an escape and more as a controlled indulgence. Because there will be another letter from Joanna in 3 weeks asking, in careful understatements, what he has learned. When Shae appears on the fringes of his world, she is one tempting distraction among many, not the sole refuge of a man convinced no one else will ever choose him. Meanwhile, his sense of purpose hardens. The city is no longer only a playground of wine and flesh. It is a cramped, stinking chessboard, pieces already in motion. Varys watches him. When Littlefinger underestimates him, Cersei tolerates him, for now. Tyrion begins to see that in this version of King's Landing, he might actually matter, if he can survive the game his mother has sent him to play, and someone else is already reshaping the board. The Red Wedding question. Does Joanna stop the worst, and someone else is already reshaping the board? 00:00. 00:00. The question is simple. 00:02. 00:02. Does that someone stop the Red Wedding, in canon? At Tywin's answer to Robb Stark is not a battle. It is an abattoir. At the Twins, guest right is invoked with bread and salt, music swells, and then steel does the real singing. Frey crossbows, Bolton knives, and Lannister gold combine to erase the Northern Command in a single night. It is efficient, it is decisive, and it stains the Lannister name in a way even Aerys could appreciate. This insult is not lost on Westeros. Bards will be spitting on the lion for generations. In this timeline, however, Tywin does not scheme in a vacuum. Joanna is there when the first raven arrives from the Riverlands, when reports of the young wolf's victories pile up on Tywin's desk like unpaid debts. She listens as he paces, jaw tight, listing each humiliation. Jaime's capture, Stafford's defeat, the Westerlands raided. It is clear that the old fury is there, the growing need to make an example that will echo from Winterfell to Sunspear. End his rebellion, Joanna says one night. Oh, the candle's burning low in the solar. Break his army, take his bannermen, but do not break Guest right. Her voice is calm, but it cuts. She knows court, remembers Aerys, remembers how quickly a king becomes a monster in song once he crosses certain lines. We are not Freys. Tywin's first instinct continues to be annihilation. A clean stroke, no half measures. However, with Joanna in the room, that stroke is redirected. She proposes alternatives, and she does not merely suggest them as hypotheticals. She outlines them like campaign plans, targeted strikes on Robb's supply lines, buying off key northern houses with gold and marriages, a betrothal between a Lannister cousin and a Manderly heir, quiet promises to the Karstarks, already resentful, to deepen their anger, sow discord, then harvest defeat. There is a pattern interrupt here. Tywin, the man who in canon jumps straight to wedding knives, spends more time talking about banners and bread. Joanna forces him to consider that a single, infamous betrayal will not end the North. It will harden it. You can win this war, she tells him, or you can win every war that comes after. Choose which. Meanwhile, their history matters. Decades of Joanna tempering him, of arguing Elia and her children must survive, of proving that mercy can still serve Lannister interests, have worn down the sharpest edges. He is still ruthless. But he is no longer a man who needs to prove he is harder than grief. So what happens? In one fork, the Red Wedding never occurs. Robb is ground down in the field, bled by attrition, betrayed in smaller, uglier ways that never become a single myth. In another, the twins still run red, but the horror is reduced. Robb and his inner circle die in an ambush outside the hall, not under guest right, the women and retainers spared. Still brutal, still a warning. But not a curse etched into the bones of the realm. With that, the Lion's victory is narrower, less theatrical, and the Lannister name survives a little cleaner, just in time to face the next colder storm. A softer or sharper Tywin? Long-term personality drift. And here is where the long game really shows itself. If the Red Wedding is cleaner, if the Lion's roar is a little less rabid, what does that do to the man behind it over 30 years? It's Tywin Lannister in canon is a study in escalation. His father's weakness, Aerys' insults, Joanna's death. Each wound drives him toward harsher tools. Joanna surviving interrupts that spiral. She does not make him gentle. She makes him efficient. The difference is small in the moment and enormous in the ledger of a lifetime. Take his cruelty to Tyrion. In the books, every barb, every public humiliation carries the unspoken accusation, you killed her. Here, that poison never enters the cup. And Tyrion still disappoints him, still frustrates him, still reminds him of every jest about Lannister lions whelping a twisted cub. However, Joanna refuses to let Tywin use the boy as a whipping post for his grief. The famous line at trial, "You are no son of mine," never happens, not because Tywin is suddenly kind, but because he understands, with Joanna's constant cutting reminders, that public spite toward his own heir is reputational self-harm. The same drift appears in war. Canon Tywin sacks King's Landing with wildfire and terror, then later orchestrates the Red Wedding, proving that fear is his preferred currency. In this timeline, he still uses fear, but he trims the spectacle. Joanna survives Aerys' court. She remembers Rhaella's terror. She knows what unrestrained cruelty does to a dynasty's long-term stability. So, when Tywin proposes flaying, burning, or parading corpses, she asks one cold question. Will they fear you or hate your grandchildren? Or this insult is not lost on him. He adjusts. The massacres become targeted strikes. the atrocities quieter, the witnesses fewer. Meanwhile, his manipulation of Cersei and Jaime shifts from brute control to managed disappointment. He still blocks Cersei's ambitions, still pushes Jaime into roles that serve the house rather than the boy. But with Joanna present, the conversations move from shouted decrees to controlled negotiations. Cersei is not merely a pawn. She is a volatile asset Joanna helps him hedge. Jaime is not just a failed heir, he is the sword arm of a broader, three-part legacy. That brings us to Tywin's late-life view of succession. In canon, he clings to Jaime, despises Tyrion, and uses Cersei as leverage. Here, it is clear that he has been forced, over decades, to accept a more complex arrangement. Jaime carries martial glory and the Lannister name. Cersei carries the royal connection and courtly influence. Tyrion, age trained by Tywin's own hand under Joanna's watchful eye, carries the administrative mind. Tywin does not love this compromise. He endures it because it works. By the end, his relationship with Tyrion is still strained. The old man continues to see every jest as a challenge, every bottle as a weakness. Yet without the shadow of Joanna's death, the venom is gone. There are grudging nods in council, terse acknowledgments of competence, or the occasional shared victory over some particularly inept rival lord. When the crossbow finally fires, or when some other fate claims him, Tyrion mourns a hard father, not a lifelong tormentor. And Tywin's own epitaph changes. In canon, his death on the privy feels like the fall of a tyrant, the realm exhaling as a monster exits. Here, the reaction is more complicated. Lords remember the taxes paid on time, the roads kept clear, the wars ended quickly. They remember the woman at his side who kept his worst instincts caged, or at least collared. With that, his passing reads less as divine justice and more as the end of an era, the death of a feared, formidable statesman whose sharpest edges were always, just barely, blunted. Yet, if Tywin grows marginally softer in private and sharper in public, what does that mean for the next generation of rulers he leaves behind? Does Tyrion still kill his father? The crossbow dilemma. With that question hanging over Tywin's legacy, another, sharper one, cuts through the quiet of the rock. If the old lion dies with his humanity intact, does his son still kill him in a reeking privy with a stolen crossbow? In canon, the path is brutally direct. Tyrion is framed for Joffrey's murder, paraded through a trial that was never meant to deliver justice, only a lesson. Shay's betrayal twists the knife. The woman he loved appears in the witness stand and later in his father's bed. Tywin plans to have him executed, confident that Tyrion will die as he lived in Tywin's eyes. A mistake to be corrected, an insult to the Lannister name. It ends in that cramped chamber, with a bolt through the hand of the king and a lifetime of abuse discharged in 2 pulls of a trigger. Here, the ingredients have changed. Joanna survives, and with her, some essential piece of Tywin that grief once burned away. He still values order, still cares more for the family name than individual happiness. But it is clear that he has invested in Tyrion's mind for decades. This insult is not lost on him when Tyrion squanders his gifts on wine and whores. Yet he does not indulge the same casual sadism. Fewer cutting jests at feasts, fewer public humiliations. The contempt continues, but it is colder, more controlled, and always checked by the presence of a woman who remembers the boy in the library. Odd is not only the dwarf in the throne room, so when the purple wedding explodes into chaos, Joanna is there. She hears the whispers, watches Cersei's growing hysteria, and understands exactly what a show trial will do to her youngest son, and to the realm. At Tyrion's trial, she sits close enough that every lord can see her, the Lady of Casterly Rock, perhaps the Queen Mother in all but name. She cannot erase Shay's betrayal, however she can blunt its edge. She pushes hard, and of her exile to the free cities, for a quiet removal rather than a public beheading. If Tywin refuses, she has other tools: gold to bribe jailers, old favors from her days at the Targaryen court, and a network of retainers loyal to her as much as to the lion on the banners. Let's explore that night. Instead of Tyrion stumbling alone through the Tower of the Hand, crossbow and shaking hands, he may be guided by a map Joanna had pressed into his palm weeks before. When it became clear that justice would not survive this trial. The secret passage still leads past Tywin's chambers. Shay may still be there, Joanna cannot control every cruelty her husband commits. But even if Tyrion finds her, the calculus is different. He is not the child who has been blamed openly for his mother's death. He has known a hand on his shoulder, a mother who argued for his worth in front of the man he feared most. His rage is real. The insult of Shae and Tywin's bed is real. Yet murder is no longer the only door out of that room. Joanna's voice, her plans, her insistence that the house must survive both of them, hangs over the scene. Does he still raise the crossbow, or does he walk away, leaving Tywin alive to face a son who knows he could have killed him and chose not to? Meanwhile, if Tyrion spares him, what does a humbled or enraged Tywin do with that knowledge? The War of Five Kings. Rewritten around a living Joanna. If Tywin survives that privy and Joanna survives Tyrion's birth, then the real question is not whether there is a war of five kings, but what shape that war takes when the Lannisters are led by a pair rather than a single wounded patriarch. The board is still crowded. In the north, Robb Stark rises for his father. In the Stormlands and Dragonstone, Stannis and Renly split Baratheon loyalties. In the Iron Islands, a Balon Greyjoy smells weakness and calls it opportunity. In the Westerlands and at court, House Lannister continues to pull the crown's strings. The pieces are familiar, the hand moving them is not. Joanna's presence means Lannister's strategy does not begin and end with brute intimidation. From the first ugly incident with a crossbow and a cat, Joanna reads Joffrey clearly. She sees the growing cruelty, the thrill he takes in small, needless harm. This insult is not lost on her. The boy Cersei guards so fiercely is the one most likely to destroy everything she and Tywin have built. Her counsel is simple and chilling. Tighten the regency, ring Joffrey with adults who answer to her and Tyrion. Shift real authority to a council where Tommen's future role is carefully prepared, while Joffrey is flattered, indulged in pageantry, and quietly kept from decisions that matter. Tywin, left to himself, would try to beat obedience into the boy king. Joanna, however, understands that humiliation only sharpens his spite. She proposes a different structure. Tyrion as hand in truth, Joanna as the Queen's chief advisor, and Joffrey as the gilded mask of Lannister rule. With that, the capital remains dangerous, but less erratic. Fewer sudden executions, more controlled terror. Sansa Stark enters this court not as Cersei's rival, but as a resource. Joanna has seen hostages before, from her years near Rhaella's household. And then she knows a highborn girl can be a bridge or a blade. She chooses bridge. Sansa is treated with calculated kindness, lessons in courtesy, a chamber near Myrcella, small confidences that suggest a future as Lady of Winterfell under a Lannister-approved husband. Meanwhile, letters to Robb stress Sansa's safety and value. It is clear that every smile Sansa receives is also a chain, but it is a velvet one, and it buys time. Then there are the Tyrells. Cersei sees Margaery and thinks competition. Joanna sees acreage, grain, and ships. She has no interest in replaying the Rhaella mistress dynamic from King's Landing. Instead, she offers Margaery a role, the beloved young queen to Joanna's experienced matron. Fewer petty slights, more shared counsels. The Lannister-Tyrell alliance still bristles with ambition. However, the worst fractures are delayed or blunted. No open war of queens, at least not immediately. The war remains bloody. Robb still wins early victories. Yet Stannis still brings fire and iron to Blackwater. The Greyjoys still raid. Yet the Lannisters under Joanna's co-leadership bleed less from self-inflicted wounds. Fewer alienated allies, fewer mad royal edicts, a tighter grip on the capital. The real difference comes after the battle's end, when the question is no longer who sits the throne, but who can actually govern the peace that follows. And in that quieter, more dangerous game, Laura living Joanna Lannister may be the one player Westeros is least prepared to face. Cersei with a mother. During her fall, madness averted or amplified. Power in peacetime is quieter, pettier, and far more personal. And nowhere is that more evident than in Cersei Lannister's fall, when this time, her mother survives to watch it. The first cracks appear not with wildfire, but with roses. Margaery Tyrell arrives in King's Landing all smiles and soft words, and Cersei hears only competition. In canon, that jealousy festers unchecked. Here, Joanna is in the capital, watching her daughter glare at a girl half her age and twice as adored. She remembers Rhaella Targaryen, remembers the way a lonely queen turned brittle and paranoid, and it is clear that she will not watch another woman dissolve the same way without a fight. Joanna intervenes early. She arranges shared charities, joint audiences, public scenes, where Cersei must stand beside Margaery as patron and senior queen, not spurned rival. Every time Cersei tries to cut Margaery down, Joanna reminds her, in private and in front of carefully chosen witnesses, that a queen who snarls at flowers only proves she is afraid of being overshadowed. This insult is not lost on Cersei. It stings, and it pushes her to mask her contempt instead of flaunting it. However, masking is not curing. The next crisis comes with the Faith. In the original timeline, Cersei arms the Faith militant to wound the Tyrells and ends up bleeding herself. With Joanna in play, that bargain never looks clever. She has lived through Aerys empowering pyromancers and pet fanatics. She recognizes zealots when she hears the High Septon's sermons growing bolder. Before the crown is bankrupt enough to crawl to the Sept, Joanna is already there, in measured, quiet meetings, offering grain shipments, tax remissions, demand public piety in exchange for one crucial concession: no swords. Meanwhile, she leans on Tywin's old networks, reminding key Septons how quickly royal favor can vanish, how rapidly trade from Lannisport and Old Town can dry up. The High Septon receives robes, gold, and respect. He does not receive an army. That alone strips Cersei of her most disastrous tool: no armed faith, no imprisonment of Margaery, no sham trial spiraling into full humiliation. Cersei still schemes, still whispers, still tries to poison the court against her rival, but the institutional club she used to bludgeon her enemies simply does not exist. The wildfire question is even more personal. Joanna remembers Aerys's mutterings about burning cities. She remembers the smell of smoke in the Red Keep's halls. When Qyburn appears, with his quiet voice and his interest in unconventional solutions, Joanna's alarm is immediate. She has him investigated under the pretext of protecting Tommen and Bara. Cellars are searched, alchemists questioned, old accounts from the Mad King's reign dragged into the light. The caches under the Sept of Baelor do not remain a secret project. They become evidence. Here the timeline splits. In one branch, Joanna wins. She exposes Qyburn, dismantles his work, and forces Cersei into a humiliating but survivable compromise: exile to Casterly Rock, a regency council over Tommen, and no green fire consuming half the capital. In the other, their conflict radicalizes Cersei. She learns to smile at her mother in public while moving men and barrels in the dark, determined to prove that no one, not even Joanna Lannister, can cage her. With that, the question shifts from whether the Sept explodes to something far uglier. When it does, is it only a political act, or the final burning rejection of a mother who refused to let her daughter destroy herself quietly? Ispaw, Joanna, and Daenerys. When two lionesses finally collide, the Sept burns, the city survives, but the smoke over King's Landing is only the prelude to a different fire. Because while Cersei plays with wildfire, across the narrow sea, a younger queen has been playing with real fire: dragons, unsullied, freed men who shout her name. By the time Daenerys Targaryen's prows cut through Blackwater Bay in this timeline, the Lannister order she faces is not a drunken king and a shattered council, but a realm that Joanna Lannister has spent decades quietly stitching together. Joanna is old now, but not diminished. Her hair has gone to silver, her hands to parchment, yet her mind continues to move faster than most men half her age. She has watched Aerys descend into madness, watched Robert drink himself toward an early grave, watched Bara and Aegon grow into the royalist answer to every Targaryen loyalist across the sea. She once poured wine for Rhaella Targaryen. Now she reads reports of Rhaella's last surviving daughter landing with 3 dragons and a sellsword court. This insult is not lost on her. Dragons return only once she has finally forced the realm to function without them. So, what does she do when the wheel she has been carefully repairing is suddenly threatened by a woman who wants to smash it? First, she gathers information. Reports from Dorne about Daenerys' time in Meereen, from Bravosi factors who watched her by the Unsullied, from Pentoshi merchants who remember how quickly she turned on the slavers once she no longer needed them. Joanna hears of crucified masters, of burned calls, of a girl who frees cities and then struggles to govern them. It is clear that Daenerys is not Aerys. However, she is also clearly not Rhaella. Idealism wrapped around a core of steel, with 3 living symbols of absolute power circling overhead. With that, Joanna begins to sketch options. On one board, she imagines a negotiation. The aging lioness and the young dragon in a quiet solar, the air smelling of parchment and smoke. Joanna offers what no one else can: the truth of Aerys' final years, the frailties of old Targaryen alliances, the reality that Bara and Aegon have already unified much of Westeros under a banner that promises reform instead of mere restoration. She can even appeal to shared memory, to the image of Rhaella trapped in Maegor's holdfast, while men shouted outside. Meanwhile, on another board, if she plans for war, the gold of the West, the fleets of the Reach, Bara's hardened stormlords, northern levies commanded by men who grew up with Rhaenys Targaryen. Dragons are terrifying, but ballistae grow larger, scorpions more accurate, and Joanna has spent a lifetime preparing for the day when fire might return to the skies. When she finally studies Daenerys herself, her speeches, her mercy, her sudden rages, Joanna sees the crossroads, and Daenerys could be the chance to reset the realm on terms that erase the last stains of Aerys. Or she could be a new Aerys with better PR and significantly worse pets. And so, we end in canvas and candlelight, an emissary tent pitched between 2 armies, a war table between 2 queens. On one side, Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains. On the other, Joanna Lannister, who has spent a lifetime binding them more gently. Their hands hover over the same map, over the same cities Aerys once threatened to burn, deciding whether they will redraw the realm together or test whether dragons can truly melt Lannister gold. The next move either unites their legacies or makes this the last great war Westeros ever survives. The Quiet Power. How Joanna changes the Lannister brand. In that moment over the map table, it is clear that Westeros is not just facing dragons and lions. It is facing the end result of 30 years of Joanna Lannister quietly editing what the name Lannister means. Canonically, the realm hears Lannister and thinks of a treasury that never runs dry, a smile that never reaches the eyes, and debts paid in corpses, the Red Wedding, dead children on the steps of the Red Keep. Power wielded as an insult to the idea of honor itself. Here, however, Joanna has spent decades sanding down the excess. She does not stop Tywin from being ruthless. Oh, she stops him from being wasteful. A butcher's bill must buy something. A betrayal must secure more than a moment of satisfaction. With that, the Lannister brand changes in ways that never make the songs, but quietly rewire the politics of the realm. Hostages taken in this timeline tend to survive. They are fed, educated, occasionally even married, well instead of mailed back in pieces. Oaths sworn to Casterly Rock are honored more consistently, even when it stings. Yes, when Tywin orders a village burned, there is a ledger behind it, not just a temper. The brutality is still sharp, still terrifying, but not mindless. Lords whisper that Lannister cruelty continues, though it now arrives with terms attached. Meanwhile, that reputation shift seeps into alliances. Houses that, in canon, only stomach Lannister gold at sword point now consider long-term compacts. The Reach does not simply rent its spears, it negotiates marriages, fosterings, trade guarantees. Dorne, it remembering Elia and her children alive under Joanna's protection, finds fewer reasons to plot in darkened solar rooms. There are still schemes, of course, this is Westeros, but fewer of them are driven by pure moral revulsion. The Lannisters are feared, yes, yet also grudgingly respected, as rulers who will keep their word if the bargain is worth their while. Inside Casterly Rock, the change is even clearer. Servants see a dwarf son who is not hidden, all but publicly instructed by his father and defended by his mother. They see a daughter drilled in accounts and correspondences, not only in smiles and poison. They see the great Tywin Lannister, on rare but memorable occasions, yield to another's judgment when Joanna's reading of a lord or a city proves truer than his. This insult is not lost on Cersei. who has spent a lifetime watching her mother win arguments she thought she deserved. Nor is it lost on Jaime, who understands that honor in this house now has more than one definition. Pattern interrupt. Imagine being a minor Westerlands bannerman. In one timeline, your lord's dwarf son is a joke, and your oaths are a trap. In this one, breaking faith with Casterly Rock is still terrifying, but so is disappointing the woman who remembered your daughter's name at a feast 10 years ago. Joanna's survival does not turn the lions into heroes. It makes them more complex, more stable, and, in the long run, more dangerous. They rely less on shock and more on sustained, intelligent power. And as dragons return and queens rise, that quieter, colder stability may matter more than any single sword stroke in the wars still to come. The biggest winners and losers in this new timeline. If the lions are colder and quieter, who actually thrives in that chill? And who freezes first? With that in mind, let's explore the biggest winners and losers in this new Joanna-centered timeline. The most obvious winner is Tyrion. In canon, he survives his mother and loses his future in the same night. Here, he survives and gains one. Joanna shields him from Tywin's worst contempt, then forces her husband to see the boy's growing competence. It is clear that Tyrion is not the drunken afterthought of King's Landing, but the trained master of coin of Casterly Rock long before he ever reaches the capital. When Robert needs grain moved, ships hired, and loans renegotiated, it is Tyrion, backed by Joanna's reputation and Tywin's banners, who quietly keeps the realm from starving. The small folk of the Westerlands win with him. It fewer pointless flayings, more roads repaired, more debts forgiven, when Joanna reminds Tywin that a dead peasant pays no taxes. The realm itself, despite everything, also benefits. A Joanna-tempered Tywin still sacks King's Landing, but he spares Elia and her children, turning a massacre into a calculated hostage play. Yet the Aegon fostered at Casterly Rock and Rhaenys at Winterfell create a cross-country web of loyalties. Fewer burned castles, more negotiated submissions. Aerys is the first great loser. Instead of a chaotic, delayed betrayal, he faces a coordinated Lannister withdrawal of credit, grain, and soldiers. His paranoia spikes earlier, his options narrow faster, and when the lions finally turn, there is no doubt that this is regime change, not random treachery. Meanwhile, Cersei loses something she never knew she lacked: the freedom to indulge every impulse. Joanna blocks the more deranged schemes, undercuts the fantasies, and, when necessary, simply sends her daughter away to Highgarden or the Eyrie, rather than let her stew in resentment at court. This insult is not lost on Cersei. She continues to reach for Jaime, continues to dream of golden children on the Iron Throne, but now she must hide from a mother who actually notices when her twin disappears down the wrong corridor. Jaime sits in the ambiguous middle. He loses his inheritance when Joanna and Tywin shift their hopes to Tyrion's mind and Barra's crown. But he gains a mother who visits the White Sword Tower, who teaches him how to turn vows into leverage rather than a prison. Robert, too, both wins and loses. He gets a politically competent queen in Cersei, as backed by an even more formidable queen mother-in-law, and a daughter, Barra, who can ride, fight, and charm the Stormlands into order. He also gets far less room to drink the realm into collapse without a Lannister audit appearing at his door. Far away, Daenerys faces a more stable, less self-destructive Westeros. Aegon raised under Joanna's eye, and Rhaenys bound to the north mean that any invasion must contend with a functioning royalist bloc, not 5 squabbling kings. The Greyjoys hesitate when the west and north move in tandem. The Starks must rethink honor in a world where Lannisters keep oaths more often than they break them. So, as we move forward, mentally recast your favorite arcs, Stark, Targaryen, Greyjoy, through this new Lannister core. Every choice they make now runs into a living Joanna Lannister, and that single surviving woman quietly scrambles the entire board. 3 children, 3 paths. Jaime, Cersei, Tyrion compared. And with the board scrambled, the most revealing pieces are still the same 3 lions we know. Jaime, Cersei, Tyrion, 3 children, 3 paths, all still Lannister, but pulled by Joanna's gravity instead of just Tywin's shadow. Start with Jaime. In canon, he enters the Kingsguard as a golden fool, dreaming of songs, then becomes the Kingslayer, and spends the rest of his life pretending not to care that the songs turned on him. Here, Joanna survives to watch Aerys growing unstable, and to watch her son growing idealistic. She is served at court. She has seen what oaths to madmen cost. So when Aerys demands Jaime for his white cloaks, Joanna does not only argue with Tywin, she sits Jaime down and tells him, in quiet, cutting terms, what the Mad King truly is. Jaime still takes the white, but he does it forewarned. When Aerys orders wildfire under King's Landing, when he screams for Aaliyah and her children to die, this insult is not lost on a Kingsguard who has listened to his mother describe Harrenhal whispers. Jaime's sword still goes through Aerys. However, the moment at the sept afterward changes. Instead of slumped, half-defiant silence, he can repeat Joanna's words to Ned, that oaths to monsters are already broken, that he chose which oath to keep. It does not fix his reputation, though it gives him a spine that is less self-hating and more quietly defiant. Meanwhile, Cersei grows up in a mirror held constantly against Joanna's competence. Canon Cersei is isolated, raised on half-remembered praise and full-bodied resentment, learning power from a father who uses fear and a king who uses wine. Here, every tantrum runs into Joanna's cool disapproval. Every petty cruelty is contrasted with her mother's ability to win people rather than only cow them. It is clear that this Cersei either breaks or sharpens. She chooses both. She continues the incest. She still sees Joffrey as her true heir, but she has watched Joanna manage Elia Martell and Sansa Stark in the same hall. So, when Sansa comes south, Cersei's treatment shifts. Less open torment, more weaponized courtesy. She studies Sansa as a rival pupil of Joanna's school of queenship, testing whether the girl can be molded into an ally against Bara rather than just a victim. The paranoia is still there, growing under the surface, but it wears better dresses. Then there is Tyrion. Canon gives us a man whose wit is sharpened by pain and turned inward until it poisons everything, ending with a crossbow in his father's chest. Here, Joanna forces Tywin to raise him as a reluctant heir. The jokes remain, the wine remains. However, his lessons are not stolen from books in the dark. They are drilled at his mother's desk and his father's war table. Tywin focuses on logistics, Joanna on people, and Tyrion learns both. At the Blackwater, that difference is brutal. Canon Tyrion charges with wildfire because no one else will. Here, he has already been allowed to design supply lines for the royal fleet, already argued with Bara over which captains to trust. His defense is not a desperate plea for relevance. It is the culmination of a role he has been trained for. When he is nearly killed, the insult is not just that a dwarf dared to lead, but that the carefully prepared Lannister-Baratheon plan nearly died with him. With that, the three siblings stand in new positions. Jaime, the deliberate oath-breaker, Cersei, the measured schemer, Tyrion, the sanctioned strategist. Their flaws survive. They are redirected. And the real question becomes, what happens when these three adjusted lions finally clash with the dragons coming home? Could Joanna have saved the realm from itself? The adjusted lions are in place. Dragons are on the horizon. But before steel meets fire, we need to ask a colder question. Does Joanna Lannister's survival actually make Westeros less horrific? Or does the realm simply find new ways to destroy itself? Joanna's record tells us a few things. She has lived inside Targaryen dysfunction. Watching Aerys's paranoia grow from inconvenient to lethal, she has managed Tywin at his softest and his hardest, steering him away from insults he cannot afford and vendettas he cannot win. It is clear that she understands the cost of royal madness in a way most Westerosi lords never will. She knows what it means when a king stops listening and starts burning. So let's explore the major breaking points. As Aerys descends, Joanna uses her history as Rhaella's lady-in-waiting to keep a channel open. While Tywin fumes at being passed over for Rhaegar's bride, she continues to press for compromise. Marriages, fosterings, anything that binds lions and dragons instead of setting them at each other's throats. She cannot cure Aerys, but she can delay the final rupture, buying years where Tywin still hesitates to turn on the crown. When Robert's rebellion comes anyway, that delay matters. Joanna pushes Tywin to stay neutral longer, then to enter the war, not as butcher, but as arbiter. At the sack of King's Landing, she is the one who insists on taking Elia and her children alive, not from mercy alone, but because dead princes are bargaining chips reduced to ash. The realm still bleeds. It simply does not watch two children dashed against a wall for the sake of Tywin's reputation. Pattern interrupt. Does this restraint end the cycle of vengeance? No. Dorne still seethes, Robert still drinks, and Cersei still plots. However, with Aegon at Casterly Rock and Rhaenys in the north, Joanna turns potential martyrs into hostages, students, and eventually mediators. The powder keg remains. Is it the fuse burns slower? Meanwhile, in the next generation, the Red Wedding never quite becomes the Red Wedding. Joanna has no love for Robb Stark's broken oath, but she has an even lower opinion of mass murder at dinner. She pushes Tywin toward humiliation over annihilation, hostages taken, titles stripped, songs written about Stark folly instead of Stark corpses. The insult is not lost on Walder Frey, who wanted his legend written in blood. But Westeros quietly gains thousands of men who survive to fight the real war. Against the faith militant and later Daenerys, Joanna's power is thinner. She can counsel moderation toward the sparrows, urge reform instead of torture. But prophecy and hunger are not so easily bribed. Dragons do not negotiate with Lannister marriage contracts. Yet even here, she can blunt edges. Fewer burnings, fewer sacks, fewer examples made in city squares. With that, her role becomes clearer. Joanna is not a savior of the realm. She is a damper on its worst impulses, a brake on vengeance and spectacle. She cannot stop every war, but she can keep the political machine from devouring itself quite so quickly. Perhaps just long enough for Westeros to notice that the real enemy is coming from the cold, not the capital. The emotional heart. Tywin and Joanna's marriage. Revisited with that, her role as damper and brake is only half the story. The other half is quieter, and far more dangerous to the original timeline. Joanna Lannister survives, and the coldest man in Westeros never quite manages to freeze. Canon gives us one rare mercy. Tywin and Joanna actually love each other. Not a political convenience, not a duty carried out in separate beds, but a marriage people at court remember with a faint, bewildered envy. When she dies in the original history, it is clear that something essential in Tywin dies with her. In this version, that wound never opens. The scar never forms. The man continues to bleed in private, and only she knows where the bandages are kept. They age together through crisis. When Aerys jokes in public about betting Joanna on her wedding night, this insult is not lost on either of them. In canon, it curdles into silent hatred. Here, we see the aftermath in their chambers. Tywin standing rigid by the window, Joanna behind him, hands steady on his shoulders as he admits, only to her, that he wanted to draw his sword on his king. Yet she does not soothe his pride. She redirects it. "You will outlast him," she says, "but only if you do not let him see he has wounded you." Years later, when Jaime takes the white cloak, Tywin rages. The hand of the king reduced to a man with one son in chains of honor and another in chains of public scorn. Meanwhile, Joanna listens, then cuts through his fury with surgical cruelty. "You taught Jaime to be honorable. Do not punish him for believing you meant it." He hates that argument, and he obeys it anyway. Jaime remains Kingsguard, but the door between father and son never slams quite as hard. Cersei's defiance, her growing jealousy of Bara, her secret children with Jaime, Joanna sees all of it. Behind closed doors, she and Tywin fight over their daughter in low, vicious whispers. In public, they present a united front so seamless that courtiers assume perfect agreement. The reality is messier. Joanna pushes for Cersei's safety and a measured containment of her worst impulses. Tywin pushes for control. Sometimes Joanna wins. The times she loses are the ones that echo, and always there is Tyrion, the dwarf who, in another life, was only the shape of Tywin's grief. Here, Tywin still flinches at the sight of him on bad days, but Joanna refuses to let that flinch become policy. In private, he admits fears to her he would never voice to a council, that a crippled, mocked son cannot carry a dynasty, that mercy will be read as weakness. She challenges him, relentlessly. And when he listens, he is almost humane. When he does not, we recognize the man from the original timeline. This partnership humanizes Tywin for us. He is no longer a monolithic villain dispensing atrocity from a moral vacuum, but a tragic, controlled man whose worst choices often arrive in the moments he stops listening to his wife. The sack of King's Landing, without Elia's murder, the quieter handling of rebels, the refusal to turn every slight into a lesson written in blood, these are not accidents. They are marital compromises. So, this what if is not just a political thought experiment about banners and battles. It is a story about one enduring marriage, stubbornly affectionate in a brutal world, bending the arc of that world a few crucial degrees away from monstrosity. The question is, when the dead finally walk and dragons return, is that slight bend enough? Alternate endgames. How could this version of Westeros conclude? So, if that slight bend away from monstrosity holds, where does this Westeros actually end up? When the dragons land, the dead march, and the dust finally clears over King's Landing, who is still standing at the council table? One plausible endgame keeps the lions right where they prefer to be, at the center of the board. Daenerys and Aegon reach Westeros to find not a rotting Baratheon regime, but a Lannister-managed monarchy fronted by Queen Bara and a more functional small council. Joanna, older now but still sharp, quietly engineers a post-war settlement that looks less like a single throne and more like a spine of power running through the great houses. A reformed council, with Bara, Tyrion, and Aegon sharing authority, continues the war effort against the others while distributing concessions. The North's ancient rights restored, Dorne's autonomy guaranteed, and the Reach placated with trade and grain. It is clear that this is not mercy, it is structured survival. In that world, Casterly Rock remains a political capital in everything but name. Tyrion, trained for decades by Tywin and Joanna, becomes the indispensable architect of peace, while Jaime commands a royal host that is actually loyal to the realm rather than to Cersei's whims. The Vale stays largely untouched, its knights emerging as the fresh, unbled fist that secures the trident. The Reach prospers, feeding a growing royal army. The North, bound to Rhaenys and Bara by old fosterage and shared war, holds its kingship in all but title. Meanwhile, Dorne sits on the council as an equal. An insult to old Targaryen habits that this insult is not lost on the dragons, but they accept it because the alternative is extinction. Now, with that more optimistic path laid out, let's explore a harsher one. Joanna's patience with Cersei has limits. And Cersei's paranoia continues to grow, despite every attempt at moderation. Maybe she never blows the entire city to ash, but she can still burn a quarter of it, trying to root out imagined plots, still plunge the capital into a shorter, sharper chaos. In this version, her final act is contained. Jaime and Bara move faster. Tyrion has more allies, but the Red Keep is left half-ruined, and Cersei is removed in chains or on a bier. And Tyrion and Jaime are then forced into the role Tywin always claimed to want, rebuilding a city they helped break. The North and the Vale, disgusted but needed, send men and grain. Dorne and the Reach demand reforms in exchange. The Lions survive, but now they wear their shame openly. And then there is the darkest variant. Joanna survives the childbirth that killed her in canon, only to die decades later, after shaping this entire alternate age. When she finally falls, perhaps on the eve of winter, all the impulses she has held in check for Tywin and Cersei snap loose at once. Tywin, old and terrified of irrelevance, lunges for one last act of ruthless consolidation. Cersei, freed from the one person she ever feared disappointing, indulges every cruel instinct. The realm still gets its wildfire, its betrayals, its quiet massacres, but on a delayed schedule, when the North, the Vale, Dorne, and the Reach are far more entangled with Lannister fortunes. Their collapses are slower, more tragic, and much harder to escape. In each scenario, shifting one marriage's center of gravity twists the fate of every region. The North's pride, the Vale's isolation, Dorne's grudges, the Reach's hunger for influence, they all refract through Joanna's presence or absence. Alternate history does not promise a perfect end. It only shows how character, choice, and chance keep colliding when a single person survives one bloody night. The real question is whose story this Westeros is telling by the time the last lion falls silent, and we are not done answering it yet. Why? This one change hits so hard? Theme and symbolism. It is clear that this is more than a clever puzzle with lions and crowns. Joanna's survival presses on the deepest nerves in A Song of Ice and Fire. Who is sacrificed, who survives, and what powerful men do with the ruins of their love. In canon, Joanna's death is textbook Westeros. A noblewoman's body is spent to produce an heir, her life reduced to a transaction between womb and dynasty. The halls of Casterly Rock gain a son and lose their heart. Women's lives and deaths are political currency. Joanna's is one more coin spent without ceremony. Tywin takes that loss and turns it inward, then outward. The man who once laughed with his wife becomes the man who orders the red wedding. The connection is not subtle. So, when we let Joanna survive, we test something fundamental. Is Tywin's monstrosity inevitable or contingent? Without his wife, he calcifies into pride and terror, the cold administrator who burns the riverlands and slaughters at supper. With her, let's explore whether the same man who adored a lady-in-waiting at court can remain human when power and grief pull in opposite directions. Does the hand who once resigned in fury at Aerys's insults still become the architect of a wedding drenched in blood? Or does Joanna's hand on his shoulder divert the knife at the last moment? Meanwhile, Tyrion's entire existence is reframed. In canon, he arrives as a living curse, the child whose first breath coincides with his mother's last. Every cruel word Tywin speaks is sharpened by that association. Here, he survives without that stain. He is still a dwarf, still mocked, still underestimated. However, he is also Joanna's miracle, the son who nearly killed her and yet did not. This insult is not lost on Tywin's pride, but it has to compete with Joanna's open, growing affection. The question becomes uncomfortable. How much of Tyrion's bitterness, his need to wound before he is wounded, is innate? And how much is the result of years spent being told he murdered the only person who ever loved Tywin? Joanna herself carries symbolic weight beyond Casterly Rock. She has seen the worst of Targaryen madness up close, in attending Rhaella while Aerys decayed from eccentric to monstrous. When she later watches her own children flirt with that same blend of entitlement and paranoia, Cersei's resentment, Jaime's fatalism, Tyrion's cynicism, her personal history turns into political foresight. She can look at Daenerys' dragons, or at Aegon raised under her roof, and remember the smell of smoke in the Red Keep. With that memory, mercy and caution become policy rather than sentiment. In the end, it's Joanna's survival becomes a lens for the entire saga. The line between the world we read and the slightly less broken one we imagine is terrifyingly thin. One woman lives through one bloody night, and suddenly the Red Wedding is not a foregone conclusion. Robert's rebellion is less of a coin toss, and even the dragon's return meets a Westeros marginally more prepared. The story continues to be about power and its cost, but the bill is itemized differently. And if one spared mother can tilt history this far, what happens when the dragons finally arrive over a Westeros she helped shape? Pulling back the curtain, how we built this alternate timeline. So how do we actually get from one spared mother in a birthing room to dragons wheeling over a different Westeros? Let's explore the scaffolding under all this madness for a moment. The first pillar is simple. We stay chained to the canon timeline. Joanna dies in 273 A.C., so we ask what happens if she does not. Jaime and Cersei are 4 or 5, Tyrion is a newborn, Tywin is already hand. We track the known dates of Robert's rebellion, the sack of King's Landing, the births of Robert's bastards, and the long, slow slide into the War of the Five Kings. The ages of the Lannister children, the sequence of Aerys's paranoia, Robert's coronation, and Ned's return, North remain intact. The story continues to run on Martin's clock. The second pillar is Joanna herself. We lean on every canon scrap of her biography, Tywin's unusually affectionate marriage, her years as Rhaella's lady, the infamous bedding ceremony insult from Aerys. This insult is not lost on a woman who has watched the Targaryen court rot from the inside. It is clear that a Joanna who survives does not suddenly become a different person. She simply has more time to pull levers. So, our guiding rule is to change as little as possible beyond her survival. And to assume the characters remain themselves unless there is a strong, story-driven reason for growth. With that, we focus on documented decisions and ask how Joanna's continued presence nudges rather than erases them. Aerys still burns Rickard Stark. Rhaegar still runs off with Lyanna. Robert still raises his banners. However, Tywin's choice to sit out the early rebellion, then arrive late and open the gates, passes through Joanna's filter. We reinterpret the scene of Elia and her children on the floor of the throne room. Instead of silent corpses, we imagine Joanna having already argued in private that dead heirs are worthless leverage. One altered conversation in a Lannister solar reframes an entire massacre. We apply the same method to Mamie's white cloak. In canon, his oath is a teenage reaction to wounded pride and Aerys' spite. Here, we keep the spite, but add a mother who understands courts. Jaime still takes the cloak, but now it is a negotiated shield for Lannister influence, not merely a tantrum in armor. Meanwhile, Tywin's later resignation and retreat to Casterly Rock are preserved, though the man who returns home has a wife to check his worst instincts about Tyrion and to redirect his need for legacy. Throughout, political plausibility wins over wish fulfillment. Tyrion does not become handsome, Cersei does not become kind, and Tywin does not become warm. They are simply given different pressures, different incentives, and a Joanna who will not quietly survive her husband's worst impulses. And this is where you come in. Maybe you think Joanna would be harsher on Cersei, more willing to marry her off early, or more ruthless in war, ordering the deaths of Elia's children herself. Maybe you see her refusing to back Tyrion as heir, clinging instead to Shismay despite the white cloak. Each of those tweaks sends the river of events down a different channel. Bara might never reach Winterfell. Aegon might flee across the narrow sea. The North might never trust a Targaryen again. We are, in the end, playing in the same sandbox Martin built, using the same tools he favors: character, consequence, and the slow grind of history. The only cheat is one roll of the dice in a Lannister bedchamber. From there, the game plays fair. The next step is to see how these rules hold once dragons, prophecies, and the dead in the snow begin to press against Joanna's carefully arranged order. It's from bloody sheets to burning thrones, recapping the journey. From there, we can pull back and see the whole board. One woman survives a night of blood and screaming, and the game rearranges itself around her continued heartbeat. The point of divergence is simple. Joanna does not die in Tyrion's birth chamber. The sheets are bloody. The Maester is pale. Tywin is certain he has been punished. Then she breathes again. To Joanna, the twisted child pressed into her arms is not a curse but the price of her own survival, a miracle that lets her continue. To Tywin, however, that same child no longer stands alone as the embodiment of loss. Joanna's hand on his wrist, her refusal to let him spit the word monster, blunts the wound before it can fester. The resentment never rots all the way through. From that choice, the Lannister household bends but does not break. Tywin continues to groom Jaime as heir, drilling him in command, law, and the careful arithmetic of power, while Joanna quietly refuses to let their golden son become only a sword. Then Aerys takes Jaime for the Kingsguard, and the insult is not lost on either parent. Cersei grows up checked at every turn, her vanity pruned, her cruelty redirected, her worst instincts met with Joanna's cold stare rather than an empty doorway. Meanwhile, Tyrion is not shoved into the shadows, but seated at the desk. He is taught ledgers, ravens, and the names of every bannerman. It is clear that, despite Westeros' contempt for his body, his parents are treating his mind as a contingency plan. Politically, the ripples widen. With Joanna's memory of court and Rhaella, Tywin's withdrawal from Aerys is calculated rather than sulking. He waits, he watches, he withholds. When the gates of King's Landing finally open, the sack is still brutal, but moderated. Tywin's men are leashed by orders drafted at a table where Joanna sat. And Elia and her children survive, not by mercy, but by usefulness. Robert's rebellion ends with hostages and fosterage, not a pile of royal corpses. The Lannister brand is still feared, still hard, but less drenched in atrocity. Later, when the War of the Five Kings comes, their house enters it with fewer ghosts clinging to its banners and a different reputation to weaponize. And yet, for all that, we leave certain doors open on purpose. Does Tyrion, older and more valued, each still put a crossbow to Tywin's chest after years of quiet humiliations? Or does Joanna's presence keep that final insult from landing? Can she derail a Frey Bolton conspiracy? Or does the Red Wedding still unfold while she is counting ravens in the west? When Daenerys finally stands across the sea with dragons, does Joanna reach for alliance, preemptive war, or some third path that even Tywin would have dismissed as impossible? Alternate history, after all, focuses on possibilities, all not fixed answers. With that, we circle back to the emotional core. Joanna does not turn Tywin into a hero. She does something rarer. By surviving, she keeps just enough of the man beneath the lion's mask alive that his love, his pride, and his fear are forced to share the same table. One woman's continued heartbeat keeps him human enough that the fate of millions can bend, if only by a few crucial degrees. The question is how far those few degrees can carry Westeros, once dragons, dead men, and prophecy demand payment. Your turn in the game. Invite viewers to rewrite Westeros. Those few degrees are where you come in. If Joanna continues to breathe, if she continues to stand at Tywin's shoulder instead of haunting him, then the next move in this game is not theirs alone. It is clear that the smallest altered choice can send a crack running from the rock to the Red Keep. So, choose one. Joanna has the strength and the time to force a single, immovable change. Does she block Jaime's white cloak, keeping him at Casterly Rock as heir, while Tywin grinds his teeth and trains him anyway? Does she push Cersei into a different marriage, trading a miserable Baratheon crown for a Tyrell rose or a Martell son? Or does she do the unthinkable in canon and fully back Tyrion as heir, insisting that the dwarf no one wants is the only Lannister clever enough to survive what is coming? In your version, which one decision does she nail into the board? Oh, no matter how loudly Tywin roars. With that, let's explore one scene. Pick a moment from the books or the show and drag Joanna into it. The Red Wedding, where Walder Frey smirks under his leaky ceiling. Tyrion's trial, with the court baying for blood. The explosion of the Great Sept, green fire swallowing gods and kings alike. Now imagine Joanna is there. What does she say in the Twins' Hall as musicians reach for crossbows? Who does she move in the throne room? Whose pride does she slice apart with a single, precise insult? Does she stop the wildfire, or does she see it as the only way to cauterize a festering court and quietly help it along? Do not just tell me who lives or dies, tell me who changes. Does Tywin, under her steady growing pressure, genuinely bend, or does he merely learn to hide his worst instincts behind her softer face? Despite all her efforts, is he destined to become the same man, arranging the same atrocities with better table manners, or can she actually pull him a few crucial steps back from the edge? Meanwhile, what happens to Cersei when her mother is still there to see every lie, every lover, every cruelty? In the next runs through this world, we will not stop with Joanna. We will ask what happens if Ned Stark accepts Renly's offer and brings the North and the Storm to King's Landing together. We will ask what if Rhaegar kills Robert on the Trident and walks into the city bearing victory instead of ashes. We will ask what if Robb Stark keeps his oath to Walder Frey and the music at the Twins never turns. For now, return to that birthing room at Casterly Rock. The maester's hands are red, the air is thick with the iron stink of blood and the salt of sweat, and the cries have gone thin. In canon, Joanna's chest falls and never rises again. Here, she drags in one more breath. Then another, then another. Somewhere far away, a war that has not yet started shifts by a hair. Tell me, in the comments, what she does with that borrowed heartbeat. Tell me which oath she breaks, which wedding she averts, which child she saves or hardens. Because in Westeros, the sharpest sword is often the person who survives long enough to keep fighting for the people they love. And we have only just begun to see what happens when she does.